Now let's check Adriana's side of the story. It made sense, but it didn't. I guess to truly explain that statement, I had to complete it. It made sense to me, but probably not to anyone else. The closest thing I could think of was a song. I'd been humming this song for the past 2 days. It was called Stay in the Dark. And just like in the song, all I wanted to do was hole up in a motel room with Bernard. We'd gone to all 3 of the paint shops on the area. All I could do was sit back and laugh. Bernard had inspected each place as if they were hospitals that might potentially be chosen to perform surgery on our critically ill first child. That had taken me down a whole different train of thought. It had started me thinking about having a child myself. Meanwhile, Bernard was comparing paint chips and asking about different painting techniques. He needed to know how long their process took and the number of clear coats. He was actually taking notes on his iPad. He had photos to go along with all of his notes. He eliminated one place out of hand. All the way back to our motel, he was complaining about that place. I had no idea why, but I knew he was going to tell me. "Did you see it?" he asked. He was lying down on the bed looking at his notes. By that time, there was no longer a need for any pretenses. We were sleeping together and I loved it. My biggest regret was that all we were doing was sleeping. As Bernard lay there on his stomach looking over his notes, I climbed onto the bed and got on top of him. I looked over his shoulder and pressed the left side of my face against the right side of his and looked at the photo he was looking at. "Do you see it?" he asked with pure disgust in his voice. I was looking at a photo of the corner where 2 walls met. My brain kicked in then. This was something that I should know more about than Bernard did. We were both engineers, but Bernard was a manufacturing engineer. He knew nothing about building construction. That was my specialty. I knew a lot more about building and maintaining structures than he did. So if he saw it, I should have seen it too. I looked at both walls. Even though Bernard's iPad took high-def photos, I couldn't see a single defect in either wall or the area of the floor they joined with. "Do you and the bitch, I mean your ex, have any kids?" I asked. "No," he said, still staring at the photo. "We're gonna," I said. "I think you'll be a great mother," he said. "You're smart, you're pleasant to be around, and you have a great personality. Did you see it?" "Not yet. Tell me more about why I'll be a great mother," I gushed. "Well, if you have boys, they'll definitely be proud to introduce you to their friends. They'll have the prettiest mother in their school. But girls?" he said. "What about girls?" I asked. I wanted to hear him talk about me more. I always had to draw things out of him. Bernard was simply not the type of man who liked to run lines on a woman. "I think girls would probably grow to resent you," he said. "Why the hell do you think that?" I asked. "I'd be my daughter's best friend." "Yeah, but imagine being a teenaged girl," he said. "I don't have to imagine it, honey," I laughed. 8 years ago, I was 1. So take a look in the mirror and imagine being all nervous about bringing your first boyfriend home to meet your parents. The boy is nervous too because he really likes her, and he wants to make a good impression. They open the door. She calls out, "Mom, I'm home." Then you come into the room and her boyfriend's jaw drops to the floor. For the rest of the visit, he totally forgets about her. All the poor boy can do is stare at you. From that moment forward, the relationship is doomed. From then on, when he looks at her, all he sees is which features of hers come from you. He's constantly wondering when she'll begin to look even more like you. If it's a serious relationship, when they're having sex, he'll imagine he's with you. And being your daughter, she'll obviously be smart enough to figure out what's going on. So she'll dump him. But she won't bring any more boyfriends home. And your relationship will change a little bit. You won't be quite as close. I was floored. "So you'll talk to her then, right?" I asked. "What will I have to do with it?" he asked. "You're going to be her father, you idiot. You won't be able to just stay out in the garage and ignore her." He burst out laughing then. "You think I'm joking, don't you?" I asked. "Just watch. Now what am I supposed to be seeing in this goddamned picture?" "Don't tell me you don't see that dust on the wall," he said with pure revulsion in his voice. From listening to him, you'd have thought he was describing a child molester. "There is no way we're leaving our cars in that place. If they get painted there, that dust would be embedded in the paint. There's just no way." The look on his face, that kind of pissed off little boy who can't imagine that whatever he's upset about isn't the most important thing in the world, only served to endear him to me even more. It was funny and terrifying at the same time. I swear I could see our sons in his face. "Whatever you want, honey," I told him. At that moment, a tear rolled down my cheek. It was a really good thing that I was lying on his back so he couldn't see me. Over the past few days, I'd learned a lot about Bernard. He was one of the most caring men I'd ever met. Just seeing me cry would have started him on one of his campaigns to find out what I was upset about. But I was just thinking that my mother would have loved Bernard. And that reminded me that my mom was the reason I'd started this whole crusade. For some reason, meeting Bernard had thrown my plans off of the table. It was as if destiny had changed her plans for me. Only a week ago, I was consumed with making my father pay, making Kathy pay, and making the criminals they were working with pay. In my mind, they were all responsible for my mother's decision to end her life. As close as my mom and I were, I knew she'd thought about it before. That was one of the reasons for her stays in some of the facilities she'd been in. But this time they pushed her into a corner and made her feel as if she had no other choice. But somehow after meeting Bernard, all of that had faded into the background. I knew my mom would have understood. After all, I'd grown up with her telling me stories about how meeting my father had changed her life. I remembered chapter and verse how he became her reason for everything she did. I wasn't nearly as bad as she was. After all, I hadn't lived my life on a shelf. I dated and had relationships, more than a few of them. I'd had guys who wanted to marry me, guys who wanted to date me, guys who wanted to be my friend, and guys who just wanted to screw me. But somehow none of them ever lasted. I blame my mother for that. It was all of those stories. I guess I've just been waiting for someone who could make me feel the way my dad made her feel. And the only thing I can say is that I am so glad I waited. I feel like my heart is going to explode. If I had just settled for one of those silly but cute young guys that wanted to marry me, I'd have had to break his heart. I'd have people thinking that I am the worst hooker imaginable, because this thing with Bernard means everything. I'm locked in a slow, simmering seduction that I have no control over. For the first time in my life, I am not in control. I know what I look like and how I'm built. I'm not the most beautiful thing on the planet, but I've never been turned down. But Bernard is a completely different animal. I can feel the attraction between us. The sexual tension is like a thick rope being pulled and twisted between us. Bernard keeps laughing when I talk about us. Why the hell would you think I'd be dumb enough to fall for that? He asked. Then I realized that I had a few things working against me. One was that he was still really hurt by Kathy's betrayal. That made him a lot less likely to want to jump right back in the saddle, as it were. Another thing was that even though he was angry as hell at Kathy and swore he would divorce her as soon as he got out of the mess we were in, he wouldn't start anything new until he was legally free. The third thing was something that pissed me off. Bernard and I listened to what was going on at Darrow on a daily basis. They had no idea that I had bugged the office before any of this shit started. We listened to them every day. Kathy was still giving my dad sex. She'd even screwed him once in the bed that she had shared with Bernard. I think that was their last straw. But what I was angry about was the fact that Steiner and his guys were always going on about how I had conned Bernard into the whole thing. According to them, I had used him and then threw him away. They were absolutely sure that I had lured Bernard in with sex and then abandoned him. They'd said it 100 times or more. Why the hell would a hot 20-something chick want a guy in his 40s? I really believed that bullshit was poisoning Bernard against me. So I worked on him every night. We had to stay in the area for 2 weeks. We dropped each car off at a different paint shop. I had no idea what was going on or why the hell it would take so long, but I intended to use the time productively. Every day we went somewhere and did something. We went on picnics. We went to off-the-wall museums. We went for walks in the woods and skinny dipped. Some days we did absolutely nothing. We just drove around in our rented Ford Focus RS. And it was working. Every day I loved the man more, and I was beginning to feel the wall around his heart crumbling. Surprisingly, it crumbled more in public than it did when we were alone. When we went to check on my Camaro's paint job, a guy came out and said, "Sir, the work on your Camaro is going well. It's a complicated job, but I think we're gonna deliver what you asked for." "It's not my Camaro," said Bernard. "It's my girlfriend's." I almost went into shock. "I'm not his girlfriend," I said. "I'm his fiancée." My heart was beating harder than it ever had in my life. The smile on my face felt as if it would split my head in half. But Bernard never denied it. When we left the paint shop, it was barely noon, but I was ready to go back to the motel to go to bed. Bernard looked at me as if I was crazy. "What about the other paint shop?" he asked. "What about the rest of our plans for the day? What about that castle we were going to visit this morning, and you were dead set on seeing the world's largest collection of the world's smallest versions of the world's largest things?" "Screw that shit," I said. "This is Kansas. None of that stuff is going anywhere." "Adri, we aren't going to spend the rest of our lives in Kansas," he said. "These are things that you wanted to see. So let's see them before we leave the state. We may never come back here." My heart was already beating like a drum, but Bernard saying things like we and us and our lives ramped things up even higher. I felt the way people describe themselves as feeling when they first do narcotics. So we drove around Kansas, me with the biggest smile on my face of all time. I held his hand most of the time. We went to his paint shop to check on his car. We went to lunch and I'm sure I ate. But for the life of me, I can't remember what it was or what it tasted like. But I remember him wiping something off of my face and telling me that I was too pretty to walk around with sauce on my chin. I remember watching the way his mouth moved when he chewed. And then we drove around to every rinky-dink oddity imaginable. I was being tortured. I had no interest in any of that shit. All I wanted was to go back to our room. I continued to smile, but my mind was working at light speed. I was caught in my own trap. I had been the one who'd asked to go to all of those places. But truthfully, it had been a part of my plan. I'd figured that going to all of those silly carnival attractions would be like dating. It would bring us closer together. I guess that, like my mother, I was relentless when it came to getting my man. I figured it would be a long, slow burn, but today had been like a flash fire. We had moved much farther along over 2 words he'd uttered to a virtual stranger, and from his failure to deny another word. In some cultures, that could be considered a legal and binding contract. So at that moment, I was trapped. I had to go through with all of that crap I'd asked to do. It was killing me. Now let's check the story from Kathy's side. For 2 days, Steiner's computer geeks had been monitoring Adriana's Facebook page. They looked at messages, they looked at her wall, and they looked at photos. The problem was that, unlike a cell phone, Facebook accounts could only be tracked if the account holder enabled their location services. The location feature was designed to allow the account holder's friends to find them. Adriana was smart enough to turn her location services completely off. Not only was her location unavailable to the public, her friends couldn't even find her. Adriana was also extremely picky about who she accepted friend requests from. The geeks had been trying for 2 days to get her to accept a friend request so they could access more than the public features of her account. One thing that made me smile was that Adriana's status showed that she was in a relationship. That made me feel much better. It meant that there was some guy out there that she felt serious enough about that she didn't want Bernard. Adriana was constantly posting photos of food. The food pictures seemed to be the only thing she made public. It was maddening. We knew she was somewhere in Florida, so we kept searching for restaurants in Florida that served the dishes she posted pictures of. Bernard was easier to track, though. We were still tracking his phone, too. Bernard was holed up in one location in California. We could go and get him anytime we needed to, but everyone was convinced that Bernard had simply been used and duped. Steiner got angrier every day that passed. He finally burst into the office and looked at Jason as if he was going to kill him. "We have to get that money back," he hissed. "I had to give one of my associates from out of town a payment. And since we can't access our offshore funds, I had to give him money from my legitimate personal account. If I keep doing shit like that, I'll go broke. Maybe it's time to step things up," I told him. He turned his head around and looked at me. So did everyone else in the room. "Your techies haven't been able to find her, right?" I asked. He nodded. "We haven't been able to get past their security, but her Facebook account has still been our best way of keeping up with her. So maybe it's time to give up and flip the script," I said. "You mean just let that bitch have my money?" growled Steiner. "Nope, not at all," I said. "I mean, instead of us trying to find her and trying to chase her all over the country, we make her come back to us." "Kathy, I'm not following you," he said. "Her Facebook account," I said. "Adriana may not care about her father. After all, she hasn't tried to contact him once since she left. But she stayed in contact with some of her friends on Facebook. She's even sending them pictures and messages. If we grab 1 or 2 of them or put the squeeze on someone she does care about, she'd have to come back here and deal with us to help them." A smile broke out on Steiner's face. "I also think that her uncle might be another target to attack," I said. He nodded and looked at me. "It sounds like a plan," he said. "What do you want this time?" "I want you to send someone to California and bring my husband back. We know where he is. He doesn't move. He's holed up someplace there. I want him back, unharmed." "Done," he said. Then Steiner and his entourage went wherever they went when they weren't visiting the office. All that afternoon I was happy. The thought of having Bernard back, no matter how angry he was at me, made happy. "I don't understand," said Jason from behind me. "Why are you helping them?" "Because helping them helps me," I said. "I want my husband back." "Your husband is hiding somewhere trying to get over the fact that my daughter dumped him and you cheated on him," he said. "He's a depressed, lonely old man that was taken advantage of by not 1 but 2 women. He's broken, Kathy. He's not going to be the man you remember." "He's still the man I want," I said. "You're still sleeping with me every night," he said. "I'm lonely, that's all," I hissed. "As soon as I get him back, that stops." "Well, something else that needs to stop is you helping Steiner. He's a goddamned criminal, and I have a feeling that he might not be around for very much longer. I love you, Kathy. I want you in my life, but it'll be a lot harder if you end up in jail with Steiner and his people." he warned. What are you saying? I asked. I made a deal, he whispered. I had to do something to get control of my company back. You made a deal with who? I asked. Kathy, I love you, but I can't tell you that. I've probably told you too much already. You seem to be helping Steiner too damned much. I think you have Stockholm Syndrome or something. You need to figure out which side you're on. That was just great. Now I need to figure out who this idiot is talking to and what kind of deal he made. I didn't have to worry about whose side I was on. That was clear. I was and always had been on the side with myself and my husband. I had to give this some thought this time, though. I didn't want it to seem like I was siding with Steiner. But at the same time, Steiner was too powerful and too well connected to antagonize. I wondered again exactly how I'd gotten myself into this, but I knew the answer. The second I cheated on my husband, my life had basically ended. I now had only the slimmest of chances to get my husband back. When I remembered how coldly Bernard had looked at me before he left with Adriana, my heart broke. The tears rolled down my cheeks and I began to silently cry. Now let's check the story from Adriana's side. The tears rolled down my cheeks and I began to silently cry. No man had ever turned me down before. Bernard had built me up all day. He'd held my hand and called me his fiancé. He'd had me walking on sunshine. All through dinner he'd been quiet, and he'd spent a lot of time just looking at me. The intensity of his gaze scared the shit out of me. I felt like a little girl again. Bernard, why are you looking at me like that? I asked. Adriana, you're beautiful, he said. And it wasn't just what he said. I'd heard that same line so many times it almost didn't register anymore. But coming from him, and the way he said it, it felt weird. It felt as if he was coming to terms with something. There was a really weird emotional connection between us. It had been there since the beginning, but it was as if it had just shifted into high gear. Bernard, I'm really not that pretty, I said. And I don't have huge jugs like your wife. Adriana, you're perfect, he said. And suddenly I wanted to be. I wanted to be perfect for him. But at the same time, something had changed in Bernard. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew he was different than he had been when we first started the trip. When we got back to the hotel, Bernard told me he wanted to watch a couple of episodes of the Grand Tour. We took our showers, separately unfortunately, and got ready to watch. When Bernard came out of the shower, I almost had a heart attack. Bernard usually wore sweatpants and a t-shirt. He came out in only his boxers and my heart started beating like crazy. We'd been sleeping together for 5 days by then, but sleeping was all we'd done. I loved our nights together. I loved the way it felt when he wrapped his arms around me. I felt so protected and so loved. I was ready for the next step, and as much as I'd enjoyed rubbing myself against him and fondling him during the nights, I was ready for more. I needed more. He'd looked at me and his eyes bored their way into my soul. Ready to turn off the lights? He'd asked. My heart was beating so fast I could barely nod my head. Then he turned off the lights, wrapped his arm around me, and nothing. I lay there waiting for him to make a move. But no move came. Bernard, I said in the darkness. You're always telling me that I'm beautiful. Today you called me your girlfriend. Don't you wanna? Yep, he said. Then shouldn't we get busy? I asked. Nope, he said, confusing the shit out of me. Adriana, a little while ago, you opened my eyes to the fact that the woman I married is no longer the woman I married. You stayed with me while I got over losing her, and during that time we've been together 24/7. And during that time I took a really good look at you. I know, Bernard, I interrupted. You're always looking at me. No, Adri, he said. Any idiot could love your outsides. I looked at your insides. You are one of the most caring, most compassionate people I've ever met. And more than that, you're honest. If you say something, I can believe it. That's important. It took me a while to understand the story about your mom and dad. You meant for it to explain to me that love, true love, is important. More important than almost anything. Your mom went after your dad with both feet. She loved him so much that he was her whole world. I think you feel that way about me. I'm not so sure your dad ever felt that love as deeply about your mom as she felt for him. But I really think I love you that way. So feeling that way, I have to look out for you. Adri, you deserve so much more than I could ever give you. So I have to protect you until we find someone who's worthy of you. Not some broken down 40-something guy with a cheating ex-wife. You're just too special for that. So that was how I came to be lying there in the darkness, crying my eyes out. The man I loved me back. But he thought that I was too good for him. It was the snoring that did him in. We lay there, his arms wrapped around me even in his sleep. His snoring wasn't a full-on cyclonic roar. It was a light buzzing, barely louder than a deep breath, but it told me a lot. It told me that he wasn't afraid of me or ashamed to be himself around me. My excited, feverish little mind began to work then. If he wasn't ashamed to be himself around me, that was another way of saying that he was open to me. And then there was the fact that my mom had always told me that if I wanted something, I couldn't always wait around for it to come to me. There are some times when you just have to go after the things you want, she'd said. I wiped my tears and smiled. I rubbed myself against him, and he moaned in his sleep. That to me meant that he liked it. So for 5 minutes, with infinite slowness, I worked his boxers down. Not surprisingly, some parts of him refused to go down, even in his sleep. Bernard, God damn it. You'd better be dreaming of me, I hissed. I kept doing while he was still asleep. But that wasn't what happened. Make no mistake about it. If I were a man and Bernard was a woman, what I had just done would have been called assault. The problem was that I loved him so goddamned much, and the only thing I wanted was to make him happy. Okay, I wanted us both happy. Mentally and emotionally, I knew that we were together. Bernard hadn't actually come out and said the words, but I knew he felt it. I had looked into his eyes as he gave me that absolute bullshit story about how I was too good for him. All I saw in those eyes was love. I saw more love in those eyes than anyone outside of my mother had ever felt for me. Bernard would die for me. Shit, he'd already saved my life twice. I just had to have him. The problem was that I lost control. I figured it would be like all of the other times I'd had sex. As everyone knew, I was nowhere near being a virgin. In some circles, I was closer to being a 304 than a virgin. It's not like I was some hooker. I didn't go around screwing every guy I ran into. But if I was in the mood and I felt comfortable with a guy, I was a healthy young woman. So I did what nature intended. I was also not above taking care of my own needs if time and circumstances dictated it necessary. I'd been with smart and funny engineering types and fit and physical jock types as well, but nothing prepared me for Bernard. My mom and some of my sillier friends had always told me that sex was different when you're in love with the person. I had always thought they were full of shit. I'm an engineer. I tend to look at things from a scientific point of view. So, I tend to look at things in terms of the size of my glory hole and its ability to expand or contract relative to the size of my partner's equipment. I look at fullness, seal, expansion, stretch, pressures, rate of thrust, force of thrust, duration of the act, variation in thrust and technique, lubricity, etc. In terms of size, Bernard was firmly in the middle. He was neither the biggest nor the smallest I'd ever had. I can lie to myself and say that things got out of control, but that's what it would be, a lie. From the first second I touched Bernard's meat, I knew 3 things. The first was that he was mine. Touching him brought tingles through my whole body. It was as if I had just reconnected with a missing part of me, and I was whole again. The second thing was that I was going to screw him. Yeah, I told myself that I was going to give him a handjob until he woke up. But that doesn't fly. I knew from sleeping with him that Bernard is a heavy sleeper. And I guess the only term that fits is groomed him. During the week, by constantly rubbing myself against him while he slept. But I made no attempt to wake him. I just got him ready and then had him. The third thing I knew was that Bernard and I were gonna make babies. I have no idea whether or not Bernard and Kathy had any kids, but the 2 of us would. I could feel it in my bones. As I had sex with Bernard, my life changed. Mostly, sex felt like it was a mechanical process where allowed some guy to insert something in me to stimulate nerve endings and give me a release. This was often awkward and problematic. Awkward because usually once I got that release, I no longer needed the guy. I can remember a lot of really painful scenes that occurred while trying to get rid of guys who were more attached to me than I was to them. Problematic because the main reason I was doing it was to get off, and sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I began thinking that in engineering terms I needed more horsepower. Maybe I needed either bigger guys or simply more guys at one time. But Bernard changed all of that. From that first time, it was all different. And every nerve ending had been lit up like a Christmas tree. My breath left my body all at once like a boxer had punched me in the gut. But at the same time, it felt as if Bernard and I were a part of the same soul, and that was the missing part that linked us. I was not the only one who felt it. Bernard's eyes popped open, and he was fully awake. Adrie, he croaked. But it was too late to try to stop what was happening. I leaned forward and kissed him. It was our first deep, sensual kiss, and it completed the circuit. We had wild sex. Once we were done, and after I regained my senses, I reached for him in the darkness. I collapsed on top of him and lay next to him, completely spent. Bernard did exactly the right thing. He wrapped his arms around me and covered us with blankets, and we settled into sleep. I had no guilt and no emotions other than satisfaction and a very profound sense that everything was the way it was meant to be. There was no awkwardness. And for the first time, I had no desire to be rid of him. In fact, I was even more certain that nothing would ever separate us. Not time, not our crazy situation, not death, and certainly not his crazy soon-to-be ex-wife. The morning came, and one of us was a ray of sunshine. My smile was radiant, and I couldn't keep my hands off of him. Every fiber of my being sought contact with him. Bernard, on the other hand, couldn't look me in the face. "What's wrong, honey?" I asked. "Adri, he began. "I think I took advantage of you last night," he said sadly. I snickered. I thought it was funny. The only excuse I have is that, well, we've been sleeping together, and maybe in my unconscious state, I thought you were Kathy, and so your explanation is that you sleep-screwed me? I said, trying to keep the humor out of my voice. He shrugged his shoulders. "So you thought I was Kathy, huh?" I asked. His face was non-committal. "So you didn't notice the difference in the size?" I asked. His face screwed up. "And I guess I was hearing things when you stuck that thing in me and gushed out, Adri, huh?" I asked. "Or do you call out Adri whenever you screw somebody?" "I'm sorry," he said. "The only other explanation I can offer is that I've been thinking about you a lot lately and—" "Bernard, when you think while you're asleep, it's called dreaming," I said. "Are you saying that you've been dreaming about me?" He shyly nodded his head. "Good," I said. "You're supposed to dummy. And Bernard, you didn't take advantage of me. That would be you and me. We had sex. I started it. You were asleep. Somebody had to." "Huh," he mumbled. "You heard me, Bernard," I said. "You went around yesterday telling people that I was your girlfriend, right?" "Well, that was," he mumbled. "Words have consequences, Bernard," I said. "You told people that I was your girlfriend, and girlfriends get screwed. It was as much your fault as it was mine. Are you saying that you didn't enjoy it?" He didn't even have to say anything. I could tell by the look in his eyes and his smile that he had. He was just feeling guilty. "I know you did, Bernard, so don't lie," I smirked. "I don't remember much of it," he said shyly. "Oh my God, we didn't use a condom," he said. "Are you on the pill?" "Nope, I don't need them. I don't have sex that often, and I usually do use condoms." "Well, what if you—" he began. I laughed. "Get pregnant?" I asked, completing his sentence. He nodded. "Honey, you're an engineer," I laughed. "You're supposed to understand these things. When I get pregnant, we'll have a baby, but we're on the run, and what about?" he began. "We won't always be on the run, Bernard," I said. As a matter of fact, my uncle and I had another part of the plan that would have ended this entire ridiculous situation. I just got off track because I love you, and being on the road with you has been so much fun. But your dad is. I have to get a divorce from. The criminals are looking for us," he sputtered. "Good Lord, honey." I laughed. "If you get this worked up every time I give you some sex?" "What?" he asked, looking at me. "Well, you'll just have to get used to it because I see us doing it a lot," I said. He mumbled something under his breath, thinking I wouldn't hear him. "Bernard Corey, you say the nicest things," I gushed. I held out my hand and pulled him out of the bed, and we showered together. It was a first for me, but I'm sure he'd done it with Kathy before. He kept shyly looking at me out of the corner of his eye, which had me giggling. "Bernard, you know you can look at me," I giggled. I probably shouldn't have told him that because we ended up screwing in the shower. We only stopped when the hot water ran out, leaving us shivering beneath a torrent of icy liquid. He toweled me off and carried me back to the warmth of our bed, as if I was the most precious thing on earth. I couldn't bring myself to stop touching him, and my smile seemed to be welded to my face. "So where are we going today?" he asked. "We could just stay here," I gushed. And that was what we did. We stayed in bed except for going out to eat a couple of times. We talked. We told each other everything. We both learned each other's full life stories and what we each wanted out of life. And we had a lot of sex. A couple of days later, we were lying in bed. As usual, one of his arms was wrapped tightly around me, and he glanced at his watch. It wasn't the time that spurred him to action. It was the date. "Shit, Adri," he yelled, suddenly jumping up. "Your car is ready. Mine will be done tomorrow. Bernard, can't we just pick them both up tomorrow?" I yawned. It was strange. Since I'd bought the car, it had been the most important thing I possessed. Whenever I was on the road, it was stored in my parents' heated garage under a car cover. But suddenly the car was simply a way to get from point A to point B. I'd have been just as happy trading it in and just riding around holding Bernard's hand while we drove. Shit, we had millions. I could always simply buy another car. I could have any car on the face of the earth. The only thing I wanted was a pizza and another day in my Bernard's arms. But it was not to be. Bernard picked me up and leaned towards me. His forehead touched mine. His nose touched mine. But just before our lips touched, he moved away. What the hell was that? I asked semi-seriously. That was a half of a kiss, he smirked. What do I have to do to get the rest of it? I asked. He reached out and took my hand. Come with me to get your car, he laughed. We'll stop and get pizza on the way back. And what will we do when we get back? I asked. The rest of that kiss for starters, he laughed. He swatted my back and I squealed in response. We drove to the paint shop with me sulking all the way. I was afraid to see what he'd done to my car. I mean, I knew I could have it painted back to its original color once we were free and clear, but I loved that red color. As the guy in the paint shop gushed over how beautiful the paint was, I reached for Bernard's hand. Then I saw it. I almost missed it. My car was a deep, rich brown color. I looked at Bernard as if he was crazy. I thought that at least he'd have painted it a factory color. The painting crew was whistling and patting Bernard on the back as if he was a genius. Shit, it was brown. How hard could it have been to do that? But as we got closer to the car, I noticed how luminous the paint was, and there was something familiar about it. The closer we got to it, the prettier it got. And once we got within 5 or 6 feet of the car, I began to notice that the car wasn't actually one color. There were hundreds, or perhaps thousands of tiny pinstripes going through the brown. I saw tiny lines of red, deeper browns, and even lines of yellow and lighter browns all combined to make up that color. It was then covered with, I have no idea how many clear coats. The color was beautiful. Bernard stood there, grinning like a Cheshire cat. Okay, it's pretty, I said. Where'd you get the idea? All of the guys started laughing at me. Honey, look in the mirror, he said. So you're saying that the car looks like me? I said. I don't see it. Honey, my skin isn't. I looked in the mirror and suddenly I saw it. My car was the same shade of brown as my hair. The micro stripes were the same colors as my highlights. Only someone who had spent a lot of time looking at my hair could have done it. I loved Bernard even more. I smiled just thinking about living out the rest of my life with him. I knew in my bones that the dark days were over. The pain of what my dad had done faded. There was simply no room in my heart for hating anyone, including Bernard's stupid ex-wife. Loving Bernard took every inch of room in my heart and in my mind. There was no need for us to look back when the road ahead of us was so much better. We took the rented car back to the rental office and drove to a local pizza restaurant in my car. I drove and Bernard looked really uncomfortable. I was still unable to get over the paint job. I guess I was expecting it to be just a generic spray job. My Bernard was full of surprises. As we sat down to wait for our food, a thought crossed my mind that had me on the verge of tears. Bernard saw it and reacted. What's wrong, Adri? He asked. I was just thinking that my mom would have loved you, Bernard, I told him. He leaned across the small table that separated us. He gently touched both sides of my face. He gave me a kiss that curled my toes. He did it right there in the middle of a crowded restaurant. Time stood still. It was the most special kiss I had ever received in my entire life. His lips gently caressed mine. His tongue seemed to melt against mine. That kiss promised everything. I thought I knew what love was. But that kiss was everything. It told me that I knew nothing, but in reality, all I'd known were temporary hookups and infatuations. That kiss spoke of permanence. That kiss was the beginning of the rest of our lives. I was floating on a cloud of love when our waitress came back. Wow, she said, getting our attention. As much as I hate to interrupt you, your pizza is here. I had no idea where the time had gone. I sat there staring at Bernard while the waitress served our food. She seemed nervous and shook her head several times. It seemed like she wanted to say something to me. What's wrong? I asked her. I've been married for 10 years, she said. We have 4 kids, and my husband has never kissed me like that. For the rest of the time that we sat there, I was in a daze. My craving for pizza had faded. I ate simply to give me the strength and the energy for what was about to happen as soon as we got back to our hotel room. I began taking deeper breaths even as we ate. I kicked out one of my legs and Bernard looked at me curiously. Honey, what are you doing? Asked Bernard. Are you okay? I'm warming up, I said. I'm taking deep breaths to saturate my lungs with oxygen, so I'll be able to perform better and longer. I'm stretching out my legs to enhance my strength and flexibility, and I'm scarfing down all of the pizza and beer that I can handle to give me fuel for extremely vigorous physical activity. Are you finally going to go out and run with me? He asked. Because if you are, you don't have to go through all of that. I'll take it easy on you. Bernard, honey, I only run if something is chasing me and I don't have a weapon, I said. I'm warming up because when we get back to the hotel, I'm going to screw you, and I won't be going easy on you. A passing waiter heard what I told Bernard and dropped a tray of food all over the floor near us. I think I scared him. Even Bernard shuddered a tiny bit. When we got back to our motel room, I was on him before the door closed. I pushed him down onto the bed before he realized what was going on. I needed to have Bernard more than anything else in the world at that moment. That night was the best sex of my life. I just couldn't get enough. I drained Bernard 3 times and tried to suck him back to life again. I think I almost killed him. I went to the bathroom to get a towel to clean us up with and came back to find Bernard sound asleep. I kissed him and then noticed my phone on the nightstand. It dinged, notifying me that I had a message. Actually, I had several messages, several texts, and a couple of Facebook notifications. I looked over and saw that Bernard was still sound asleep and decided to check the messages before I crawled into bed and into his arms. Some of the messages made no sense. My friend Nancy had texted me several times telling me that she was being stalked both over Facebook and on her phone, and the whole thing was somehow my fault. The messages were from someone who called himself as S. And she claimed he said that if I didn't bring IT back, things were going to get a lot worse. Nancy also said the latest messages claimed that they knew where she lived and might drop in to visit her. I sat there giving it a lot of thought. Nancy and I had been friends for most of our lives. We'd even managed to keep in touch via Facebook while I was on my trips out of the country, building homes and infrastructure in small towns and villages. Nancy was my best friend and the closest thing I had to a sister, but as I looked across the room at Bernard's sleeping form, there was no contest. There was simply no way I'd put Bernard in danger for anyone. I also had a couple of messages from my uncle. He mostly wanted to make sure that I was okay, but he also wanted to find out whether or not I still wanted to go through with our plan. He said that he'd gotten a call from my father wondering whether or not he'd seen or heard from me. There had also been a case where a couple of not-so-savory types had been out near his place checking for tire impressions. I laughed thinking that once again Bernard had saved us. Bernard's refusal to drive his Pontiac Firebird AM on a dirt road had been a blessing in disguise. The final straw, though, was a message on my own Facebook page. Although I wasn't friends with him, I clicked on a message from Malcolm Granger. Malcolm was a geek who worked for my father. He was kind of creepy but harmless. He was always watching me and trying to insert himself into conversations with me while I was at my father's business. It was strange that all seemed so long ago, but it had actually only been a few days. The message was strange. I don't think it was from Malcolm at all, and the signature proved it. It was from Steiner with an S. It was a very simple message. Bring it back, or else you'll be an orphan. The following day, your friend Bernard will be a widow. Then that cute friend of yours with the big teeth and the great curves will have an accident. Then we'll find your friend Bernard in California. After that, we'll pay your uncle a visit and continue down your family tree. We know you're in Florida, and so far we haven't made a move on you, but we can heat up that state too if we have to. Just bring it back and no one will get hurt, including you. We'll even throw in a hefty finder's fee. I hopped across the room and grabbed my earbuds. I plugged them into Bernard's iPad and started selectively listening to the feeds from the bugs in my father's office. Over the past few days, Bernard and I had been so into each other that we had neglected to check on what Steiner and company had been doing. I heard Kathy helping them more and more to track us. It was obvious that to Steiner, she was becoming more and more valuable. There were times when he and his men talked about getting rid of my father and using her to run Darrow. I heard Kathy give Steiner the idea to use Facebook to track me. And every time she came up with one of those ideas, she made sure that no one would touch Bernard. I don't think she ever stopped loving him, but at the same time, she never stopped having sex with my father. Both she and my father were fools. They really believed that they were still in charge. My father, to his credit, was trying to figure out a way to get rid of Steiner. From some of the things he'd hinted at, it sounded as if he'd contacted the FBI or some other government agency. I heard Steiner talking to his men about Bernard and me as well. Steiner's idea of a hefty finder's fee was funny. "Boss, I don't get it," said one of his men. "Why the hell are we going to pay that bitch to give us our own property back?" "I said I'd give her a hefty finder's fee," laughed Steiner. 45 slugs are pretty hefty. Her father ain't gonna like that much, laughed the men. "Her father might not be breathing for much longer," said Steiner. "I can get anyone to run this place. We just pay them a fee for keeping up appearances. And just like those sheep out there typing away for nothing, as long as they keep getting paid and we keep giving them the occasional chicken feed bonus, they won't care. As long as they can pay their petty little bills and bring home a check, they don't really care what we do or don't do. Darrow will be pissed about losing his kid, but someone has to pay for his lack of security. It's either lose a kid or lose his life. And when you consider that his kid doesn't really give a damn about him after what he did to his wife, shit, she's a cold witch. She left her own father here holding the bag while she ran off with the drive. And the way she tricked Kathy's husband into helping her and then dumped him and took off for Florida, that bitch is ice cold. I'm pretty sure she won't come back to save her daddy. That's why we're gonna start taking out her friends and family. Sooner or later, we'll hit somebody she gives a damn about." I looked across the room. It was one of those watershed moments. I didn't have to look far to find somebody I gave a damn about. But at the same time, I realized that our happiness couldn't be paid for with the misery and death of other people. Bernard would never have accepted it. There was so much that Bernard had never known. He really had changed my plans. I had never planned on falling for him, much less deciding to spend the rest of my life with him. I sent out a text to my uncle. "I'm coming back to finish this. Get it started." Then I sent a message to Malcolm's Facebook page. "Malcolm, tell S that I will accept the hefty finder's fee in exchange for it. I'm coming back. I should be there in 2 days to make the exchange. Adriana Darrow." I slipped on a pair of tight jeans and one of Bernard's shirts. I kissed my one true love and then silently swore to him that we would be together again, either in this life or the next. I slipped silently into the night and drove away, still exhausted from the workout we'd given each other. Now let's check Kathy's side of the story. Something was about to happen. I could feel it in my bones. I walked into the office, looking around to see who had noticed that I had arrived. It was important to me that everyone here thought that my marriage was still viable. If they had seen me show up with Jason, it would have started tongues wagging. I had managed to convince my closest allies that Bernard and I were working things out. They had in turn convinced everyone else. I had bristled when I overheard a couple of the guys talking about how Bernard must be really stupid to take me back when he had a solid shot with Adriana. That did 2 things. First, it let me know that the gossip about Bernard and me staying together had not only spread, it had been accepted as fact. And second, it let me know where I ranked in terms of attractiveness to the average guy. Apparently, a shot with Adriana was worth more than a sure thing with me. Now all I had to do was make the fiction that Bernard and I were still together come true. Anyone knowing that Jason had been sleeping at my house wouldn't help my goals and might in fact hamper them. So, Jason had left a half hour before I did so we wouldn't arrive at the same time. It was funny. When Bernard and I were happy, Jason and I often arrived at the same time or within moments of doing so. It had meant nothing then, but now with my life and my marriage in disarray, appearances meant everything. "Kathy!" Malcolm started screaming for me as soon as I got off of the elevator. Everyone in the office looked up to see what was going on. Jason even came out of his office. "What is it, Malcolm?" I asked. Jason had reached us by the time I spoke. Malcolm was clearly excited. His usual oily skin seemed even shinier that day. He looked especially proud of himself. His manner reminded me of a dog that Bernard and I once had. That dog was always killing things and would come running up and drop them at our feet. I was always horrified, but Bernard thought it was great. We got rats, squirrels, rabbits, and even a possum once from that dog. It always scared the shit out of me that we were supposed to feed and pet something that killed other animals. I wanted to get rid of the dog, but Bernard loved it. He didn't think there was a problem. Until the morning that the dog came running up to us with our neighbor's cat in its jaws. I had the feeling that Malcolm, who was trying to regain my approval after the incident with Steiner seeing his Facebook page, was about to drop a dead cat at my feet. "Can we talk in the office?" asked Malcolm. He was bouncing from foot to foot excitedly. I nodded towards the open door and we headed in. Malcolm tried to walk in right behind me, but so did Jason. The 2 of them ended up getting stuck until Jason pushed his way in. "What, Malcolm?" I asked. "She messaged me." He practically screamed. All of the benefits of moving into the office to gain some degree of privacy went out the window with his excited yelling. Everyone in the office who knew about Malcolm's crush on Adriana would immediately have understood who she was. The rest wouldn't have been too hard to figure out. "What are you saying?" asked Jason. "Adriana. I mean, Miss Darrow messaged me on Facebook last night," he said excitedly. "She's coming back. She said she's bringing it. She wants to make a deal." "Malcolm, do you know what any of that means?" asked Jason tensely. "Nope," said Malcolm. "You do understand that the message wasn't meant for you, right?" asked Jason. "Some of Steiner's people were just using your Facebook account to get in touch with my daughter. This has nothing to do with you. Just forget about it." "Well, can I still tell Mr. Steiner, so Kathy will ask him to give me that raise?" asked Malcolm. "That would not be a good idea, Malcolm," said Jason. "You need to stay as far out of this as possible. Let us handle this, okay?" Malcolm nodded and plodded back to his desk. I picked up the phone and started to dial a number. "What are you doing?" asked Jason. "I'm calling Steiner," I said. "What else would I be doing?" "Kathy, don't do that," said Jason. I ignored him and called anyway. "Kathy queried to speak to Mr. Steiner," I said into the phone. Steiner came onto the line and I filled him in. "I'll be there in about an hour," he said calmly. After I hung up, I grabbed Jason's hand and dragged him out of the office. We're going out for coffee, I told one of the secretaries. I'll take a French roast and any kind of donut they have, but I don't, she began. As I looked at her, and she stopped talking in mid-sentence. I don't care what you want, I said. Getting you coffee isn't a part of my job. Yes, ma'am, she said quickly. I just thought. Adriana, always. I'm going to get back to work. As soon as we got into Jason's car, I held up my hand for him not to say anything. He drove away from the building and about a mile away. We pulled into a fair-sized strip mall and parked the car. We got out of the car and walked away from it. Are you out of your goddamned mind? I yelled at him. Are you trying to get my daughter killed? He yelled right back. Jason, your daughter may be the one who got herself killed, I said. We can try to save her, but lying to Steiner or trying to hide the truth will only risk our lives. Adriana is a grown woman. She knew what she was getting into. She planned it and didn't care who she left holding the bag. In case you don't remember this, she left us to take the responsibility for what she did. For all we know, Steiner might have thought that we were a part of what happened. I don't know about you, but I like living, and I intend to keep doing it and to see my husband again. Why couldn't we talk about this at the office? He asked. Do we really know Steiner or what he's capable of? I asked. We have to assume that he's bugged the office. That's why I always talk about stuff there. If he thinks we don't know it, then he'll always think he's a step ahead of us. Now, I'm pretty sure that his geeks are monitoring Malcolm's page, so he probably already knows more than we do. After all, they sent the message, so they have to have some way of seeing if she replied. Pretending it didn't happen not only won't help Adriana, but it would possibly get us killed as well. Use your head, Jason. The only way to save Adriana is to work with Steiner and get him to let her live. He nodded, and we headed back for the car. When we got back to the office, all we could do was to sit around and wait for Steiner to show up. When he finally did, it was clear that he was nervous. After speaking to him, we found out that another shipment of dirty cash was due in that night. That meant that with the other pallets, we were sitting on almost $1 billion of illegal cash. The thing that made Steiner nervous was that the money coming in meant that yet another dangerous criminal operation would be expecting a payout of legal money within a few days. Steiner didn't have enough money in his personal accounts to continue the payouts. We really needed that flash drive back. Nothing could go wrong. We had no time, and he had run out of patience with Adriana's games. The whole thing just made me even gladder that Bernard was safely ensconced in California, trying to get over both what Adriana had done to him and what I had. Steiner had promised me that as soon as the problem with Adriana was settled, I could go to California to either bring back my husband or stay there with him. I was glad. Being away from Bernard was the hardest thing in the world for me. Now let's check the story from Adriana's side. I was sad. Being away from Bernard was the hardest thing in the world for me. At every moment I wanted to turn around and rush back to his arms. The problem was that this whole thing couldn't be left to fester. It had to be settled. There were too many people at risk. There was already the loss of my mother. I couldn't lose another person to my father's vanity or Steiner's greed. I had left Bernard to keep him safe. I would find him as soon as it was all over. Without a car, and especially since he had no idea where I was going, Bernard would never find me. My uncle and his old war buddies had helped me from the beginning. It was time to end this shit with a bang. I called my uncle as soon as I got on the road. Hey, Unc, you ready for the finale? I asked. So your honeymoon with the Pontiac Firebird AM guy is over finally, huh? He laughed. Nope, I said dreamily. I don't think that will ever end. But I need to finish this so my mom can rest peacefully and so I can enjoy the rest of my life. Did you manage to get the decorations set? I asked. Well, didn't want to install the party favors until it was time, he said. The place is deserted at night, though. We could have them up by morning. Do that, I said. That way we can wrap this shit up quickly. I put the phone down and concentrated on the wind whipping through my long, thick hair. I drove straight through. I stopped only for gas. I didn't need any of those little roadside attractions that had taken up so much of our time on the way there. I went over all of the details of the plan in my mind. I had to make contact first. I had to show strength and put them on their heels from the beginning. Of course, Steiner would think he had the upper hand. He was sure that he had all of the power. But in reality, that power was an illusion. All he had was a bunch of big dumb guys who did what he told them to do out of fear, or because he paid them. Most of his power came from money. I had taken a lot of that power away from him, and he was desperate to get it back. The problem was that in trying to get it back, he'd lose more. I went over the plan in my mind as I drove along the open road. There was very little traffic, so I didn't have much else to do. As I saw it, there was very little risk. The only risk would be after I had given them the flash drive. For a few tense moments, I would be vulnerable. But fortune favors the brave. If I wanted to get back to Bernard, if I wanted us to be able to live our life without constantly looking over our shoulders, I had to finish this. I've gone through some tough times lately. My mom's needless death had hit me hard. But the kicker had been listening to the latest feeds from the bugs we had in the office. It was funny. Bernard's stupid wife thought that Steiner had the office bugged. My dumbass dad was sure that the FBI had the office bugged to get info on Steiner. None of them suspected the truth. But that morning I'd been almost in tears when I heard my father tell that hooker he was screwing and the criminal he worked for that he had accepted the fact that I might have to die. In the best possible scenario, they wanted to have me confined in a place like the one my mother had been imprisoned in. If that didn't work, I ended up in a motel that wasn't very far away from my father's business. By the dawn's early light, I watched it for a while. Everything was quiet there. It would be hours before anyone arrived there. I drove back to the motel and wondered why I hated the room. Over the previous 10 days, I'd been in several motel and hotel rooms and had pretty much loved them all. At certain times, I'd been eager to return to them, but at that moment, although my body craved sleep like never before, I loathed the thought of going back to a room that seemed to be nothing more than a cardboard box with a door and a rock-hard bed. I needed Bernard. I needed his touch, his smell, the sound of his voice. I broke down and called his phone. My intention was to hang up as soon as I heard him. He sounded pissed and he knew who it was. "I know it's you, Adriana," he said softly. "I guess we know why you got so weird when we listened to Steiner's people talking about how you just wanted to use me and then throw me away when you got what you needed. The only thing I can't figure out was why you stayed as long as you did. I feel really stupid right now. Hey, you won. You got to me. That was some trick. I thought I was going to be a tough nut to crack. I thought that since I was still getting over Kathy, it would be a long time before another woman got close enough to me to hurt me. But you did. Gotta admit, I never saw it coming. Towards the end, you had me. I fell for you hard. The funny thing is that it wasn't how beautiful you were, or now not your body was, that I fell for. It was little things like the way you smile in your sleep, or the way you twist your hair around your fingers when you're deep in thought. And God knows I loved those big eyes of yours, and that funny little snicker that you call a laugh. Hope you're happy with yourself." I was bawling my eyes out, and before he could finish and make things even worse, I snapped at him. "Bernard, you idiot," I screamed. "I didn't win. You did. I left you stranded in that motel to protect you. This isn't your fight, Bernard. If everything goes the way I want it, I swear I'll come back to you, and we can pick up where we left off. I love you, Bernard, but you didn't sign up for any of this. I'm not stupid. My uncle and I have a plan. As soon as it's done, I'll find you." He didn't say anything. For a long time, neither of us said anything. Then the line went dead. Tears filled my eyes with their salt and their heat. I put the phone away and tried to get some sleep. I'd need it. I was asleep as soon as my head hit the pillow. They say the average person has several dreams over the course of the night, but we only remember a fraction of them. I remember 2 of mine. In the first, I dreamed that Bernard forgot all about me. He ended up with a 40-year-old former Vegas showgirl. No matter what I did, he wouldn't even talk to me. The second dream was worse. I remember waking up in a box. I tried as hard as I could, but I couldn't get out. Then I noticed a very slow trickle of liquid coming into the box. Somehow, I floated free of my body and out of the box. That was when I realized that I was dead. The box was my casket, and the liquid was a steady flow of Bernard's tears. He was crying his heart out because I was dead. I'd been shot and killed by one of Steiner's goons. I even had a flash of memory that showed me looking down the barrel of a gun just as it went off. That was where the memory ended, and the dream did as well. I woke up in a cold sweat and realized that my phone was ringing. I had only been asleep for 4 hours. I picked up the phone immediately. "We can make this work," I mumbled. "We have to. I don't think I can live without you, Bernard." "You've got it bad, girl," he interrupted. I immediately recognized the deep, rumbling voice of my uncle. "I know, Uncle," I sobbed. "It's only been a day, but I miss him so much. I feel like my heart is splitting in two." For a while, neither of us said anything. Then he broke the silence. "You sound just like her," he said. There was suddenly a lump in my throat. "She talked about him the same way," he said. "I never liked him. I always thought he was a dirtbag. I admit that he took care of her, even after she got sick. He did his best for her for a lot longer than I'd have given him credit for. But in the end, the dirtbag I always took him for came shining through." "Unc," I interjected. He shushed me. "Let me finish," he said. "I don't know Bernard, but I like him. I think he's a better man than—" "I'm glad you approve," I smirked. "So let's get this over with so I can go and find him." "Okay." Bert and Ernie are on your girlfriend. Steiner has 2 of his goons watching her. They haven't spotted our guys yet. There are a couple of guys here watching me. They're parked in a green Chevy Impala, just beyond the tree line where they think they're unseen. I'm out in the yard pretending to cut the grass even as we speak, so they think they've got the drop on me. In reality, I slipped out through the tunnel under the barn last night and did my planting. I have a cell phone-based controller that I can trigger from here. All you have to do is give me the word. Jethro is in the barn watching them as they watch me. If they make a move on me, he'll drop them. According to local ordinances, if you want to put up a shed, you have to erect it on a concrete slab with a minimum of a 1-foot rat wall around the edges. I had the city inspector come out and take photos of the area we dug out. It's ready to be poured. As soon as he left, we dug a section in the center that's a lot deeper. It's about 6 feet deep. We'll dump him in there, throw dirt over him, tamp it down, and then pour the concrete slab for the shed. There's probably room for a couple more, if need be. Okay, Unc, I said. Tomorrow is a Saturday morning. The new building should be deserted. The new building is deserted now, he said. It's unoccupied. Why wait? I have to try to call Bernard again, or leave him a message, I said. You know, just in case. If I don't get out of this, I want him to know how I really feel about him. Right now he believes that bullshit my father and the goons have been spouting. Oh, he said. But isn't that kind of true in a way? Uncle, you know better than that, I spat. Adriana, no matter how it ended up, you intended to seduce the guy to hurt his wife and break up their marriage, he laughed. Yeah, but that changed the first second I talked to him, I said. From that moment on, I just wanted to get him out of a bad situation. I just wanted to protect him, but he ended up protecting me. I love him, Unc. Okay, do what you have to do, he said. First thing in the morning we do this. I got out of the bed and arranged my hair. Bernard loved my hair. Shit, the man had designed my car's paint job, so it matched it. Thinking about that made me cry. Then I thought about how I'd left him stranded in that motel. We hadn't picked up his car yet, and it was 50 miles away in a paint shop in a different city from the motel. I never even got a chance to see what he'd done to his car's paint. I fixed up my hair and washed my face. I'd never needed much makeup, so I never bothered with it. But this was a special occasion, so I put on some lipstick. I thought about doing something with my eyes, but I remembered that Bernard was always telling me how beautiful my eyes were, so he clearly already liked them. Besides, I wanted him to see that my message was coming from his Adri who loved him, not from some painted hooker who'd used him, screwed him, tricked him, and then abandoned him. I put my phone down on the table in front of me. I shot a selfie video that told him everything I felt about him, the situation we were in, and hopefully our future. I thought about everything I wanted to say to him throughout the day and made several other videos too. There was one video where I talked about our future together. I told him how I didn't care where we settled or what we did as long as we were together. In another, I tried to explain to him how dangerous what I was about to do was and how I didn't want him anywhere near there. I tried explaining to him that if he loved me half as much as I love him, then there was a part of each of us in the other. So if by some quirk of fate or run of bad luck, I didn't survive my encounter with Steiner's crew, a part of me would live on in him. In the last few videos, I just rambled. I just wandered around telling him everything I could think of. It was almost like I wanted to share my last night alive with the man I love. Then I posted all of the videos to a special folder on my Facebook account that only certain people could access. I set the permissions on the folder so only Bernard could access it and texted him a link to it. I ate dinner and then checked to see if he had accessed the folder yet. He hadn't, but I knew he eventually would. I love you, Bernard. Much more than you know, I said to the universe, hoping that somehow he heard or felt it. Then I went back to sleep. Now let's get back with Kathy's side of the story. Even from the beginning, the day felt off. I just felt weird, but I had to get through it. I had to keep my eye on the prize. I had been sure that we would have heard from Adriana before then, but she had to contact us by today. The message Steiner's Geek had left on her Facebook page had told her that if we hadn't heard of her by the end of the day, her friend would pay the price. After that, it would be her uncle, and we'd continue hurting people who were important to her until we got what we needed. I rolled over in bed and moved Jason's hand from my hip. I just felt gross letting him touch me. It was a strange thing. At night, my fear of being alone forced me to close my eyes and pretend that my husband was sleeping next to me. But in the cold light of day, I had begun to loathe myself for what I'd been doing with Jason. Most days I could barely stomach the sight of him. But this was the last time. I swore it to myself silently. I cursed my weakness and realized that if things went the way they were supposed to, I'd be heading to California the very next day to reunite with my husband. That thought made me smile. I knew it would not be easy, but I wanted my chance. Bernard and I had been together for so long that neither of us really knew how to be without the other. That was why I had to have Jason in my bed. The pretense, no matter how disgusting it was in the morning, made it at least possible for me to get through the nights. It was still hard for me to accept that before the end of the day someone I knew would be murdered. But it was something I had to get through to get back with Bernard. I felt sorry for Jason. He was still holding on to the hope that somehow, someway Adriana could live. But Jason was feeling so much guilt that he couldn't see the obvious. He felt guilt over his wife's death. He felt guilt for not being a good enough businessman to keep his company afloat. He felt guilt for teaming up with criminals. And he felt guilty because things with Adriana had spiraled so out of control. Strangely enough, he didn't feel guilty about what had gone on between us. For the last few years or more, with his wife in and out of hospitals and treatment centers, his love for her had become only a sense of obligation. The way he saw it, he took care of her because he was her husband and was therefore supposed to. Any love he'd felt had faded over the years. He foolishly thought that he was in love with me. As many times as I told him that I didn't feel the same way, he simply wouldn't hear it. He told me repeatedly that I was showing the same type of loyalty to Bernard that he'd shown his wife. He was sure of it. But despite all of the things he claimed he could see, some of the things he couldn't see were staring him in the face. Steiner was not a good guy. He was a ruthless criminal. He'd had to be to get to where he was. Steiner ran his organization based on fear, intimidation, and money. None of his men or his victims or his peers would fear him if it got out that someone had taken his money. How could he intimidate anyone if it got out that a girl had taken his money from him and she was still breathing? He was blowing smoke up Jason's butt, and everybody who knew about the situation was sure of it. But as much as I felt sorry for Jason, as much as I would regret his loss, I had to be honest. I wouldn't cry too many tears for Adriana. Let's face it, I couldn't stand the bitch. She had slapped the shit out of me, in public and in front of my husband. She had told, and worse, shown Bernard that I had been doing what most people would consider me cheating on him. I still had yet to explain to Bernard that I was only giving Jason mercy sex. My husband has the biggest heart of anyone I know. With the right context and some time to get over it, Bernard would forgive me. Adriana had managed to frame it in the worst possible way. If anything, she should have thanked me for taking care of a need her father had that she herself couldn't address. That bitch had to go. The fact that her death got me Bernard back meant that it was no skin off my butt, and to be truthful, she deserved it. She brought it on herself. Did you say something, honey? Jason mumbled in his sleep. Yeah, don't call me honey, I hissed. I'm a married woman. He sat up with the dumbest smile on his face. It was almost as if he thought I was joking. What a dumb man. If you're so married, why did you give BJ to me last night? He smirked. Weren't you married then? It was better. Well, at least it was less wrong than giving you another mercy sex, I said. His face fell. But at the same time, the phone rang. I snatched it up. Yeah, he's here too, I replied. By 2 o'clock. Of course, easily. Wait, what time is it now? I looked across the room and noticed that it was already after 1. All right, we'll do our best, I said, hanging up the phone. I looked back across the room. Your daughter is back in town, I told him. She's going to call us at the office at 2 o'clock. Steiner wants us there. I ran to my closet and grabbed a dress, then headed for the shower. In less than a minute, the shower door opened and Jason stepped in. Get out of here, you perv. I screamed. This is serious. Your daughter is gonna call the office in 33 minutes, and we'd better be there. Jason did the guy thing. He shrugged his shoulders and stepped out of the shower, naked. He brushed his teeth with my spare toothbrush and then pulled out a disposable razor. I had told him from the first night that he stayed with me that Bernard's things were off limits. He stepped back into the shower as I was getting out, and in less than 3 minutes, he was drying himself off. I had yet to even brush my teeth, let alone put on any makeup. Before I had any makeup on, he was dressed. I looked at him, and he could tell that I was pissed. I'll see you there, he said. When we get back, we need to sit down and have a long talk about reality. You have to face the truth, Kathy. Your husband is gone. He's somewhere in California, and he won't be back. He's done with you. I'm the only one standing beside you. You need to stop taking your frustration out on me. The look on his face was etched on my mind. He was hurt. I have no idea what he thought this was. Jason really believed that we had some kind of connection. He thought that maybe I was his next wife. When he thought of us, he thought in romantic terms. I thought of us as nothing more than some temporary excitement, or maybe a rut buster that had gotten out of control. I continued it for 2 reasons. The first was because with Bernard leaving me, I was lonely and hurt and I needed someone. The second was because I was scared. Steiner was crazy. He was like a highly polished sword or a mace with a velvet cover over it. He looked refined, artistic, and maybe even beautiful. But at the same time, no matter how classy and special he looked, he was designed and made for one purpose, and that was killing people. I'd been busting my butt to stay on his good side and to stay useful to him because people that weren't useful didn't live for very long. Having Jason to go through this with at least gave me someone on my side. But it wasn't love. No matter how much he wanted it to be, it just wasn't. When this was all over, I'd be back with my husband. I have no idea where Jason would be or who he'd be with. I felt sorry for him. I mean, shit. Dead wife. Dead daughter. Company probably out of business anyway. It was like getting kicked in the nuts repeatedly. I felt for him, but I really had to bust my butt to get my marriage back on track. I'm not a mind reader, nor can I see the future. Maybe Steiner would let Adriana live. I dressed quickly and made sure that my dress showed just enough cleavage to entice, but not enough to be vulgar. I knew what my strengths were and how to use them. I got to the office probably 10 minutes after Bernard had arrived. The room was full. 3 nerdy types had taken over a part of Jason's office. They had computers and laptops and a bunch of other geekware and were arguing over computer terms that I didn't understand. It was as if they spoke a completely different language. In another corner of the room, 4 of Steiner's biggest gorillas sat with their arms crossed. None of them said anything. They were like robots that had yet to be programmed to do anything. But the message was clear. Whatever they were told to do would be done. If Steiner told them to rip off Jason's head and shit down his neck, the only question would be who got to him first. Steiner sat at Jason's desk, calmly reading the financial page. Jason sat in an office chair in the center of the room. He clearly didn't fit with either of the previously mentioned groups. His look of relief as I stepped into the room was clear. I too felt a sense of relief that he was there too. Steiner looked up as I came in. "Perfect timing, Kathy," he said. "She hasn't called yet. Do you have any thoughts? What did you have in mind?" I asked. "She calls," he said. "We make arrangements for a meeting here, obviously. I have the Geek Squad here so they can show her the surveillance I have on her best friend and her uncle and how easy it would be for something terrible to happen to them. We make a trade. She gives us the drive. You quickly check it out to make sure the money is still there and this unpleasant business ends. So you don't do nothing to my dumb brother-in-law or my daughter's friend, right?" asked Jason. "Jason, it's called a bluff," said Steiner as if Jason was a moron. "Your brother-in-law knows nothing about what we do, nor does your daughter's friend. If we were to harm them, we would only bring further unwanted interest in us. If they disappeared, it would bring scrutiny. That's why I have gone to such great lengths to be able to show your daughter that they're in danger. Again, they know nothing about us. Your brother-in-law is on his ranch working on an old car in his yard. Adriana's friend is on a date. Following her is difficult, but we're managing it. It's a bluff, nothing more. It was all designed, with help from Kathy, to bring you daughter out of the woodwork. Kathy has good ideas, don't you think? Her instincts and her sense of what has to happen are pretty good too." Then he turned to me. "Anything that we're doing that needs to change?" he asked. "When we arrange the exchange?" "It can't be here," I said. His face furrowed. "We have to go to the new building," I continued. "People are in and out of this place all the time. We have a visit from the health and safety guy tomorrow morning. You've been seen coming and going from here, Mr. Steiner. And just in case something happens," I lowered my voice. "The new building is a construction site. Sure, the offices are being furnished this week, but we could still claim that there are problems with the build and have the whole place sandblasted down to the bare concrete and metal." "But what about my tech geeks?" he asked. "They can monitor everything from here," I whispered. "And on the off chance that things don't go well, we really don't need them there. The fewer people there to witness anything, the fewer we have to worry about or get rid of." He nodded his head and smiled. "Damn, why didn't anyone else think of that?" He said to no one in particular. "My best guy is a woman." He went and started talking to the geeks. While he was talking to them, the phone rang. Everyone froze at the same time. I reached out and picked up the phone. I put it on speaker so we could all hear it. "Adriana, is that you?" I asked. "Hand the phone to my father or his boss, you useless old bitch," she said. "I didn't call to speak to the help." "I'm here, honey," said Jason carefully. "We can fix this. It's all going to be okay." "Is that the same line of shit you gave my mother when she found out what you were doing?" she asked. "You sold her out. Sold us all out to save your precious company." "Miss Darrow, can we get to why you called?" interrupted Steiner. "Ah, the silken snake," she laughed. "I called because you threatened the people I care about. You left me no choice. If you return my property, we can all go about our business," said Steiner in a voice that sounded almost friendly. Jason smiled at that. Adriana, when this is over, maybe tomorrow we can sit down and have a talk, said Jason. And maybe sunshine will shoot out of my butt, she spat. Adriana, how is Bernard? I asked. Who? She asked. My husband? I said. How the hell should I know? She said. Shit, as soon as I got myself out of trouble we separated. I couldn't take it. He was crying and whining over you the whole time. I know I'm supposed to be a cold witch, but you take the cake. You hurt the guy pretty badly, but I'm not his shrink, so I could care less. Do you have any idea where he went? I asked. Let's get down to business, she said. I have something to get rid of, so I'll be there in 2 hours. Do you know where our new building is? I asked. You mean Steiner's new front? She asked. We'll make the exchange there, I said. So we're letting the company hooker make decisions? She asked. But before anyone could say anything, she started up again. Okay, I'll be there in 2 hours, she said. But no funny business. We'll make the exchange in broad daylight, I said. What exchange, dumb shit? She spat. I'm giving you slimy criminals your flash drive back. What am I getting? You're getting Mr. Steiner's word that none of the people you care about will be hurt, I said. Mr. Steiner is a man of his word, so his promise is ironclad. I'll bet, she said. And then she hung up. The sound of the dial tone reverberated through the room. It was loud and irritating at the high volume of the speaker system. Well done, Kathy, said Steiner. And you were right about me being a man of my word. You're going to Cali tomorrow to meet with your husband. So my daughter is safe too then, right? Asked Jason. I just looked at the floor. Kathy, you told her, he began. You lied. Darrow, get a grip, spat Steiner. What Kathy said was that the people your daughter cared about would not be harmed. She never mentioned Adriana herself. That all depends on how she acts and what she does. He shook his head while he looked at Jason. I'll need the two of you at the new building in a couple of hours. I have some arrangements to make. Now let's check the story from Adriana's side. I got out of my car in front of the new building. It was more like the shell of a new building. There were only windows on the first floor. The upper floors were still open to the elements. I parked my car some distance away from the building and walked to it. I didn't want Bernard's beautiful paint scheme damaged in the chaos. As I walked, the hidden earbud in my ear comforted me. I could hear my uncle's voice. I also knew that 2 of his old army buddies were covering me from the building across the street. They were only 100 yards away and were crack shots with their sniper rifles. I was almost giddy with the thought of how easy it had been to get them to pick this location. They were sure that it was their idea, and that gave them a sense of confidence. They thought that if they controlled the venue, they controlled the situation. As usual, their sense of control was an illusion. Before I got to the building, they stepped out. At first, it was only the 2 of them. But before they got to me, 2 guerrillas came out of the building. They pointed at a picnic table under an awning in a small grassy area by the front of the building. I never gave it any thought as I nodded and headed for it. 2 Littell, my sniper's words caught up to me. Adriana, from this angle, we can't see you under that structure. Move the meeting back out in the open. I couldn't answer because they were staring at me. If I spoke, they'd know that I was talking to someone, and they'd get antsy. Kathy walked up to me. My dad was next to her. He looked angry. Kathy looked nervous. Why, Adriana? He asked angrily. Why would you do this? Do you have any idea how dangerous this situation is? I was weak, I said. You killed my mother, and I wanted you dead. But some parts of me still saw that man who pushed his little girl on the swing in our backyard. I couldn't kill you, but I figured your goddamned criminal friends would kill you over their money. I hoped that they'd kill both of you. I smiled at Kathy when I said that last part. My dad blanched, but Kathy continued to stare at me. I had never had a genuine conversation with Kathy, but this close, I could see why both of the 2 most important men in my life had wanted her. Kathy was short and peg-shaped. She wasn't pretty, but her figure were real and extremely eye-catching. I'm not sure any man could have looked away from her curves. Kathy was smart as hell. I had somehow missed it, as I'm sure most men did. The bitch was calculating and running things over in her mind even as we stood there. My father spoke again before she did. His anger was bubbling over. Adriana, you're still a child, he spat. You have no idea how anything really works. You spent all of your goddamn time building useless schools and cheap, shitty houses in Bolivia and a bunch of other places around the world. How did you pay for all of your gallivanting and good works? I subsidized it. The sweat on my brow kept you clothed, equipped and fed when the Peace Corps or the UN didn't or couldn't cover your expenses. Even before that, I paid for your engineering degree. I paid for every damned credit. With all of the money I spent on your classes and your books, they should have given me a degree too. Even before you went away to college, you ungrateful bitch. Your mother had pretty much checked out of reality. Her mind and her body both came and went. Since you loved her so much and you knew so much about her, you had to know that, right? Adriana, there were times when your mother didn't even remember that we had a daughter. She didn't even remember me, and I was there for her. Every goddamn day for years. There were times when she answered your emails. I never told you because I wanted you to have your dreams. I wanted you to have the life you dreamed of. Do you remember your first construction site? Remember building that land bridge in Brazil? Remember when all of the materials for building it had been stolen, and you wanted to come home, but your mom told you to stay there and do your job? Remember when she told you that you always had a home that was warm and safe to come back, but those people needed you? I nodded. Adriana, your mom was so zonked on antidepressants that she was barely able to stay conscious. I was the one who answered your emails. I was so proud of you. Honey, you have no idea how bad she could sometimes be. There were days when she just screamed at me for hours and I couldn't get through to her. And there were other times when her mind was pretty close to intact, but her body was so weak that she could barely breathe. If you loved her so goddamned much, where were you, Adriana? I was there doing it all by myself. I never wanted to chain you down. I wanted you to fly free and be a success. Your mother has tried to kill herself 14 times since you went away to college, Adriana. 3 of them happened when she was at home with me and seemingly lucid. He rolled up his sleeve and showed me a long, ugly, raw, pink gash on his forearm. I thought she had recovered last year, he said, holding his arm near my face. Adriana, I never left the room. We were in the kitchen. The phone rang. I turned away to answer it, and he faltered. His voice broke. She had grabbed one of the knives from that cutlery set we keep on the kitchen island. She was trying to cut her wrist. I grabbed for the knife, and she cut me. Honey. It took 48 stitches and I lost a lot of blood. They forced me to put her away again. 4 years, Adriana. She's been in and out of hospitals, nursing homes, and mental health facilities. And I took care of it all on my own. Her family. Your uncle. He was too busy on his ranch, playing with his cars, to ever even come visit her. And you were always busy too, Adriana. Year after year. Day in, day out, it was just me. In the beginning I did it because I loved her so much, Adriana. I loved her as much as she loved me. But for a sane person, love is like a flower that has to be watered at least occasionally. After the first few years, the love faded, and it became a duty, then a responsibility, and then a job. After a while, it seemed like all I had been that job and my business. The business that my father and his father before him had built. I was losing everything. I was losing your mother. I was losing my business, and I was losing everything. I couldn't let it all go. And they were connected too. Without the business, I couldn't afford your mom's care. It was a mess. I'm human, baby. I made a really, really bad decision. But I didn't have a choice. And before that, I did something that was probably wrong, but it made me feel alive again. I fell in love with a married woman. I know you don't like her, but Kathy makes me feel good again. I know you think it's wrong and you think it's the sex or her curves, but just like everyone else, you missed it, baby. It's her brain, isn't it? I asked. He nodded. She's the smartest goddamned woman I've met since your mom. In a lot of ways. Especially the way she's always got everything figured out long before I do. She reminds me so much of your mom. I know you don't understand this, but Adriana, I love Kathy. I love her so much that I'll do whatever I have to do to stay in her life. Even when her husband comes back into it. That was all it took. My father's words had gotten to me. For a fraction of a second, I let my guard down and Kathy figured it all out. Where is my husband? She yelled suddenly, stepping in front of my father and right into my face. God damn it. I should have seen this from the beginning, she said. Honey, we already know he's in California, said my dad. Bullshit. We've been wrong about this from the beginning, she said. All of the clues were there. If she was just using him, why call him baby when they left? If he didn't mean anything to her, why not call him Bernard? It's the same number of syllables. When she spoke to us on the phone, yesterday she told us that he was in California. If they weren't in contact, how the hell would she know where he ended up after they split up? And ever since she contacted us, her attitude is different. She has a harder edge. I think that we're supposed to believe that she's pissed about being forced to come back. The real deal is something completely different. Look at her. She's your daughter. You have to see it. She's practically glowing. Can we get down to business? I said. I reached around my neck and pulled out the chain with the flash drive on it. I handed it to her. I had managed to put some of the money, $85 million, back on the drive. I hoped that Kathy would never have a chance to notice that most of the money was gone. Run along and hand this to your boss, I said. As they turned, I grabbed my father's arm. Dad, stay and talk to me, I said. She can check out the drive herself. I'll be right in, he told her as she headed for the building. Adriana. He just looked at me, and I looked back at him. I was beginning to realize that maybe I didn't know everything. Maybe I really had no idea of what had gone on between him and my mother. I had no idea, and nor did my uncle, that she had attempted suicide so many times. And the scar on my father's arm, that gash had been very deep and the scar was permanent. Yet still he'd loved her and taken care of her? I began to doubt the plan. Adriana, you're in love with her husband, aren't you? He asked me suddenly. I am, I said. I'm as crazy about him as Mom was about you. And does he love you? He asked. Very, very much, I said. There's no way she'll get him back, even if she lives. His face changed then. I saw fear on his features. At the same time, I heard my uncle's warning to me. Adriana, she's opened the first file and verified the 85 million you left in that account. Steiner is calling the 2 gorillas out there. Get out of there. The snipers can't help you. You have to run for it. And then it all went wrong. Too much was happening at the same time. Through my earbud, I had several feeds going at the same time. I could hear my uncle, but I could also hear all 6 of his army buds. They'd been deployed as 3 teams of snipers. 2 watched the guerrillas threatening my best friend. 2 watched over my uncle, and 2 watched over me. The awning had blinded my 2 snipers, and I was about to pay for it. Inside of the building, Steiner had given the order for the 2 guerrillas out here to kill me. My father at the same time had reacted instantly when I mistakenly said, even if she lives. He knew then that Kathy was in danger, and he made his choice. He turned and ran for the building, screaming for her. Even as the 2 huge guys clawed at their jackets pulling guns, he ran for the building and Kathy. Things got loud then. The sound of a very powerful engine blotted out every other sound, much in the way an eclipse blots out light. Do it, I said to my uncle, even as I stared down the barrel of their guns. The engine was louder. I love you, Bernard, I said as the gorilla to the left took aim and his finger tightened. The guy on the right was clearly a chicken. He was going to let the other guy actually kill me and then pump a few more shots into me once I was dead. That way he'd have plausible deniability if they got caught. My entire body tensed as I waited for the bullets to rip me apart. But even as I closed my eyes, I popped them back open as a black Pontiac Firebird AM, seemingly on the verge of being out of control, skidded to a stop in front of me. I heard the sound of 2 bullets hitting the car, even as the rear quarter panel slammed into the 2 gorillas, knocking them aside like bowling pins. The passenger door in front of me opened, and there he was. Come with me if you want to live, he said. I heard a loud crack as if thunder had struck and the building shook. I dove into the car. Baby, we have to go, I yelled. Bernard put his foot down, and we rocketed towards the road. As I watched in the rearview mirror, the building shook again and then collapsed. There was a huge dust cloud, and then the upper floors began to drop as the large multi-story structure seemingly melted. All that was left was a pile of concrete rubble. Bernard, goddammit, you're supposed to be safe, I said. You're not supposed to be. I love you, Adri, he said. My heart filled to bursting, and then I saw the blood. He slumped over the wheel, and I pulled him to me. As the car rolled to a stop, I got out and got into the driver's seat. As I got, he put the car into gear, stomped on the pedal, and it took off like a rocket. I had to admit that his car was faster than mine. I was eating up the miles heading for the nearest hospital when I saw them. 3 black SUVs leading a fleet of fire trucks and an ambulance. I swerved across the road, blocking their path. 2 men in dark suits got out of the lead car and came over to me. Miss Darrow, we'll talk to you later, said one of them. Your father contacted us about a week ago and I need that ambulance right now, goddammit, I screamed. But what about the building that just, he began. If we don't get my husband to a hospital, I'll never say a word, I hissed. He saw the look in my eyes and 2 med techs came over to Bernard. They pulled the gurney right up to the car and put Bernard on it. They cut his leather Pontiac Firebird AM jacket. I knew there was going to be hell to pay for that. Shit, Bernard had even looked at me funny when I put it on once, and he loved me. They found 2 bullet holes and immediately hooked him up to an IV. I insisted on riding to the hospital with him. As they started to close the doors, one of the men from before held it open. Miss Darrow, your friend will be okay, he said. But you have to stay here. Someone has to give us some information. We need to figure out what was going on here. You can meet us at the hospital, I said. As soon as Bernard is treated, I'll tell you everything I can, but Bernard comes first. I turned to the EMT, and he tapped the wall of the truck. The siren blared, and we were on our way. I held his hand and told him that we were going to be fine. I couldn't stop crying. Okay, he's not old enough to be your father, so is he your cousin, brother, or uncle? Asked the EMT who monitored Bernard. None of the above, I said. Try fiancé or husband. Ouch, you just broke my heart, he said. I'm gonna break your, but if you don't concentrate on him instead of hitting on me. I screamed. Okay, lady, he said. He busied himself with checking the bandages they'd put on top of the areas where Bernard was leaking blood. I looked over his shoulder and saw that the flow seemed to have lessened. I couldn't tell if that was a good thing or not. We reached the hospital a few minutes later. As soon as the wheels on the gurney hit the ground, we were joined by at least 3 nurses. More people came every second. A nurse the size of a wall tried to stop me with a bear-like paw. Honey, your daddy is gonna be fine, she said. Just let us do our work. He's 42. I'm 27, I said. Not only did he not have a child when he was 15, he doesn't have any kids at all. Yet. But if you do your job, we might. She stood there unmoving, and I did too. It must have looked ridiculous. But then her face softened and she took my hand. She led me into the ER suite, but made me stop and put on a long yellow gown and booties over my shoes. Then she gave me a mask and pointed to a corner, where another woman and 2 men stood. Those 3 are new ER residents, she said. Today is their first day, so they're watching emergency procedures. Stand over there with them. I couldn't take my eyes off of Bernard on that table. There was a flurry of activity around him. They cut the rest of his clothes off. They took the IV that the EMTs had started and used the same needle to run fluids. They did something to find out what blood type he was. Then they started giving him blood. They all stepped back for less than a minute as a tech came in and took x-rays. The ER doctor looked at the screen on the machine and nodded his head. The tech pulled up a file on a computer in the ER, and suddenly Bernard's x-rays were on the huge monitors on the wall of the ER. Like the doctors next to me, I wandered over to the big screen and looked. His heart and lungs are in excellent condition, said the doctor. I thought someone said the guy was in his 40s? He runs every day, I blurted out. Well, he won't be doing too much running until we get the bullets out of him, said the doctor. All of that lead will hold him back. He pointed to 2 white lumps that the x-rays hadn't been able to penetrate. This one isn't bad, he said, indicating one of the lumps. If this room was sterile, I could probably take that one out here. It looks like it nicked a rib and stopped. It had probably lost energy after passing through something else. The second bullet is the one causing all of the damage. Again, it looks like the bullet had lost a lot of energy, but it's in a bad spot. It slipped between the ribs and lodged itself in his lung. Every time he breathes, he's gushing. Prep him for surgery. That was when I folded. The doctors and nurses around me nodded their heads and filed the information in their memory banks of experience and knowledge. Bernard was just another body on a table to them. They had learned some things that might help them save someone else someday, and they were moving on to the next case. Suddenly, my legs collapsed and I hit the floor. I woke up a while later in a hospital room. I could tell I'd been out for a while. I opened my eyes fully and found the giant nurse staring at me. Do the 2 of you ever eat? She asked. I just looked at her. Both of you. Severely dehydrated and nothing in your stomachs. We've been kind of busy lately, I mumbled. Where is? She pointed across the room and I saw Bernard on the other bed. He was hooked up to a bunch of machines that were monitoring his vital signs. He's gonna be fine, she said. Relief poured over me. It's you we're worried about. Tears poured down my cheeks. Does he love you that much, Kathy? She asked. I realized that they had gone through Bernard's wallet and got his insurance cards. They had assumed that I was Kathy. He took those bullets to save me, I croaked. That was when the guy in the black suit came into the room. The nurse vanished after bidding me good luck. Miss Darrow, I think it's time we talked, he said. I spent the next 3 hours eating and talking to FBI agents. I was surprised at how much they knew, but also by how much they didn't know. The reason for that was, of course, because my father had only recently called them in. Apparently, they'd had suspicions about Steiner for a while, but my father had been the first person who'd called them in to look at his activities. They'd had no time to get a warrant to bug Steiner's operations. They also had very little information on what had happened that day. They did manage to grab one of Steiner's geeks, but they only knew that Steiner had hired them to monitor my Facebook page and to try to get information on me from the computer. At first, they thought that Steiner was keeping my father in line by threatening me. I let them know that wasn't true. I also backed up what the geek had told them. Steiner had lured me there that day to get something back that I had taken from him. The flash drive that accessed his offshore accounts, right? Said the agent. I nodded. It had $85 million on it in untraceable money. Why did you come back? I had no choice, I said. Steiner was threatening to kill my uncle and one of my friends. The geek they had as custody had admitted that Steiner had him and his friends running video surveillance on my uncle and my friend. So why were you there that day? Asked the agent. I want to give them their flash drive back and save my uncle and my friend, I said. I thought it would be easy. I give the drive back. They leave my uncle alone. He shook his head. And that's where things went wrong, he said. They were never going to let you go. You had embarrassed them, and from your time working for your dad, you knew too much. I shrugged my shoulders. Why were there pallets full of cash in the destroyed building and in your father's business? He asked. It was money from Steiner's illegal businesses, I said. You know, his narcotics running and trade stuff. He couldn't show where the money had come from. That was the reason he needed my dad. They made it seem like the money was coming from my dad's legitimate business. Once the money was taxed and banked, it became legal. The money on the flash drive was different. It was money shuffled into offshore accounts. Why didn't you take that money and run? He asked. I didn't know how to access it, I said. And that would be stealing anyway. I'm not a thief. I just took it because I was upset with my father for working with criminals. I figured that if I embarrassed them, they wouldn't want to work with my dad anymore. We figured that some of Steiner's enemies were the ones who took the building down, he said. There are a couple of less than stellar individuals who were harassing him about money. His money laundering service was so successful that he was offering it to other criminals, I said. He nodded his head and made a notation on the pad he was writing on. So how did Mr. Corey end up getting shot? He asked. Trying to save me. I didn't want him there. I didn't even tell him that I was coming back here. What do you mean back here? He asked. We left, I said. We were out of here. It was just the two of us in our cars on the open road. It was heaven. It was like a honeymoon. And you came back because of the threats? He asked. I nodded. But I didn't want Bernard to come back. I was worried that he might get hurt. Bernard is always trying to protect me, I sobbed. I'm gonna kill Steiner. Somebody beat you to it, he chuckled. As he told me about the building's collapse and their suspicion that one of Steiner's rivals had done it, I feigned shock and surprise. Miss Darrow, your father was one of the bodies we recovered, along with his associate Mr. Steiner and several of Mr. Steiner's employees. The building was a total loss. I just stared at him. I know this sounds totally cold, but everything he said just sounded like Charlie Brown's teacher. I just heard blah blah blah. The only thing I was concerned with was the man on the bed that I was sitting beside. I wanted him to wake up so badly. My worst nightmare had come true. This was even worse than my worst nightmare. My worst nightmare had been that Bernard and I had gone to see Steiner, and in the process Bernard was hurt or killed. What made it worse was that I had lied to Bernard to protect him, only to have him take 2 bullets that were meant for me. All I could think of was Bernard. The rest was blah blah. Yeah, my dad was dead. Truthfully, I think it was the best possible ending. He could spend eternity with 2 women fighting over him, but on equal terms. I began to wonder then, was my mother's eternal spirit the fiery woman that she'd been in her younger days? Or was she doomed to spend eternity in the next realm of existence as a gibbering, semi-coherent madwoman? I figured that either way she beat the shit out of Kathy. I had a terrible thought then. What if Bernard didn't pull through? Would he wait for me or settle for Kathy's spirit? That bitch claimed she loved him, but she cheats on him easily enough? So do you agree with my suggestion, Miss Darrow? He asked. Huh. I answered. Now let's check the story from Kathy's side. I slowly came back to consciousness when I felt the hands on my arm. The pain was so intense that I blacked out again. From what I've been told, that was a good thing. I came to again, and this time I made it to full awareness. I was lying on an extremely hard board. I couldn't move. I was strapped to the board. I looked around me and saw a young woman sitting next to me. She appeared to be a nurse or an EMT. She realized that I was awake and quickly injected something into a port in the IV they'd connected to me. I tried to speak, but couldn't open my mouth. Suddenly, pain dominated my psyche. My head hurt worse than anything in life ever had. My chest hurt. My stomach hurt. I began to take stock. Both arms hurt from the shoulders down. Several of my fingers hurt so badly I was sure they'd been amputated. My upper back hurt badly. My neck hurt. Luckily, there was no pain in my legs or lower back at all. The rest of my body felt like a single pulsating wound, though. I screamed. At least I tried to. Barely any sound was produced. The EMT pointed at the needle she'd just pushed into my IV. I just gave you an injection for pain, ma'am, she said. Don't worry, you're in good hands. I'll treat you just like you were my grandma. The thought that I could be mistaken for a grandmother while only in my 40s wasn't lost on me. I took another look at the woman and saw that she, a short, chunky, chipper type, would be me in a few years. I actually liked her. I felt far more comfortable with her than I would have if she'd been built like Adriana. Those tall, slender, long-haired, man-stealing types made me want to strangle them. Whatever she gave me for the pain was good. Really good. Within a few minutes, I swear I saw pink unicorns along the periphery of my visual range. When I woke up again, there was a man in a dark suit sitting in a chair next to my bed. Every part of my body felt as if it was stuffed with cotton. As my eyes fully opened, he turned his head, looked at his watch, and then looked at me. "Welcome back to the land of the living, Miss Quarry," he said. His bedside manner sucked. His flat voice and delivery reminded me of Hugo Weaving playing Agent Smith in the Matrix movies. Shit, I forgot that he acted the same way in every other goddamned movie he made. "It's Mrs. Quarry," I said. "I thought all of you liberated, businesswoman types preferred a relationship-neutral title like men have," he said, smiling. "Please forgive me. But wait, to be a Mrs. you have to have a husband," and his voice dropped off. A flash of memory took me back. The last thing I remembered was that Jason was coming into the building screaming. Before I made out what he was saying, I saw the directory tree of our accounts come up on the computer screen that showed the contents of the flash drive. As usual, the first level of the tree totaled $85 million. In a few seconds, the other 3 full levels, which each contained 100 million, should have appeared. I nodded at Steiner and told him the drive seemed to be intact. I hadn't actually seen the rest of the money, but things were happening so fast. He spoke into his phone and told the men outside to kill Adriana. Everything started to speed up at that point. Everything was moving so fast. It was funny. I've always heard that in extremely traumatic situations, everything slows down. There were so many things going on at once. The 2 guerrillas outside raised their guns to shoot that 304 Adriana. But at the last possible second, I heard a sound that I knew only too well. The sound of Bernard's Pontiac Firebird AM came out of nowhere. Even though the car that hurtled between Adriana and the guerrillas, just as the pop-pop sounds of gunfire sounded, wasn't Bernard's grabber orange Pontiac Firebird AM, I knew. I just knew that he was in it, and my heart sank. Before I could even scream, the car swerved and smashed into the 2 gunmen, flinging them like bowling pins. It just felt wrong to me, but I could see that, as usual, my husband was so busy saving Adriana that he had no thought for anyone else. What really angered me was that before he found out about my mistake, he felt that way about me. He'd always been there when I needed anything, no matter what. That thieving bitch didn't deserve my husband. I got ready to run back out there and confront her just as I heard something that sounded like a rumble of thunder. Then that fool Jason came running into the room screaming. He slammed into me, knocking me off my feet into a corner of the room beneath one of the archways. I was as mad as a wet hen. I was about to give him a piece of my mind, but suddenly everything fell apart. I had no idea what was going on. Before I could rise, the walls collapsed, and a huge chunk of concrete crushed Jason. I was horrified. Huge chunks of concrete fell all around me, and dust or smoke was everywhere. Steiner was on his feet. He looked at me and ran for where the door used to be. "Help!" I screamed. It quickly became clear that he wasn't helping anyone. "See ya, Ka," he began before a huge shard of concrete speared the spot he'd been standing on. I suddenly realized that Jason had saved me. The smoke was so thick I could hardly move, but I didn't dare leave the safety of the archway. Something must have landed on my head, because the next thing I knew, the EMTs had me. "What do you remember?" asked the man sitting next to me. "The building fell on us," I sobbed. "Adriana did it. She did this to us. That 304. He started laughing. "The rock that landed on your head must have hit you harder than they thought." He laughed. "How do you know that she didn't?" I screamed. "We're the government, sweetheart," he smirked. "We know everything." "You don't know shit," I spat. "You guys are so busy jumping through hoops and trying to prove the president isn't crazy that you can't get anything done." "Yeah, well, we still managed to keep surveillance on Adriana Darrow during this whole episode," he said. "Ever since her father contacted us." "Why would you keep surveillance on her?" I screamed. "Haven't you ever seen a spy flick?" he asked. "In situations like this, there are matters of protocol. One of them is to always follow the money. In this case, there were 2 sources of the money. One was those pallets of illegal cash in the basement of the Darrow building. The other was the flash drive that we learned about from the listening devices we had placed in your office. The pallets of cash weren't moving. The flash drive was, and Steiner seemed hell-bent on getting it back. Plus, another one of those protocols is to always follow the hot chick. I was getting really pissed that even a moronic government spook thought Adriana was hot. Anyway, he continued, at no time during her little junket out of town did she purchase or acquire any explosives. At no time did she return to the newly constructed and even more newly demolished building. As I recall it from the conversation you had with her only hours before the building blew, it was you who convinced her to move your meeting to that building. She spent her entire time out of town." He paused. I got the feeling that he was trying to avoid telling me something. "Tell me," I yelled. "Nah," he said. "Tell me, God damn it," I screamed at him. "Only if you tell us everything we want to know about Steiner's operation," he said. "Look, I don't know everything," I said. I only know about the money laundering stuff. That's all we need, he said. Okay, what did that bitch do while she was out of town? I asked. I was hoping that she'd done a bunch of shit that could make Bernard angry at her. That way, if they were somehow still in contact, I could break up their fledgling little romance and get my marriage back on track. As usual, I was running all of the facts over in my mind. I had no idea yet whether to blame it all on hormones or narcotics. But Adriana doing something stupid would really help. It was incredibly boring, he said. She went to visit a lot of really stupid attractions like the world's biggest ball of string and shit like that. She went to parks and sat by the water. It was really boring. But from watching them, we could tell that they were only going out to kill time and… Wait, I squealed. You said they? It was like they were on their honeymoon. He continued as if he hadn't heard me. They just did boring stuff all day and then went back to their motel room and screwed the cowboy out of each other. They couldn't get enough of each other. They screwed so much that I got tired of watching it. I mean, a little variety would have helped. You know? Maybe some handcuffs or a little dress up. I was so happy I was salivating. If Adriana was spending her time screwing some guy, then she was no more faithful than I had been. And since Bernard and I had a lot more history and I had my excuse of being on narcotics or hormonal, I was sure I could win him back. So who was the little bitch honeymooning with? I asked gleefully. Do you know the name of the guy she spent all of her time screwing? Of course, he said. Who was it? I asked. I've shown you mine, he grinned. You show me yours first. I spent the next 2 hours answering questions for them. It was strange. They already knew most of what I knew. It was almost as if they were using me to verify information that they'd gotten from someone else. Between sessions I spent answering their questions, I had sessions with doctors and specialists who took me for more x-rays and tests. I could tell by the looks on the faces of some of the doctors that something was going on. I could also tell the spooks were holding some information back from me too. But I had been testing them as much as they were testing me. I was pretty sure that they were going to charge me with being an accessory to Steiner's operations. It was a big part of the reason I had agreed to help them. I didn't really give a flying crap who Adriana was screwing. Just the knowledge that she was bumping uglies with some loser was enough to help me get my husband back. I already had a plan in mind for the bumbling idiots. I needed to know exactly what they knew and what they might be able to tie me to. They apparently had no idea that we had blackmailed Adriana into returning by threatening her loved ones. I also don't think they had any idea of the scope of how much I had helped Steiner. So the only thing they could charge me with was being an accessory to money laundering. I intended to get a good lawyer and claim that everything I did was under duress. I'd claim that I only helped because I was in fear for my life and my husband's life. Before our next session, began the man who spoke like Agent Smith. I'd like to offer you a reward. Why are you giving me a reward? I asked suspiciously. Because I want you to remember me as your friend, he said. You mean you want to try the carrot before the stick, I said. So you're trying to be nice to me before you bring the hammer down on me. Then you'll offer me a deal to stay out of jail, right? No, Kathy, he said. I'm just offering you a bit of human kindness to a person going through a rough time before things get even rougher. He gestured and 2 CNAs came over and gently moved me from the hospital bed into a wheelchair. They pushed me into an elevator and up several floors. This is post-op, he said. It's where people are brought just after surgery. For some stupid medical reasons, they waited several hours to do the surgery. And even then, they removed the first bullet and then waited several more hours before removing the second one. I guess the blood loss caused so much weakness that the surgery might have done more damage than benefit. Why do I care now many times they shot that useless a-hole? I said. Truthfully, I was happy. I had really believed that Adriana had escaped harm again. Maybe it would do me some good to see her bullet-riddled body struggling to breathe. Aren't you afraid that I'll get up and finish what Steiner's guys started? I laughed. My arms, back and shoulders hurt pretty bad, but there's no pain in my legs. I could kick the shit out of that hooker. I'm not worried about you doing that, he smirked. I have faith in your sense of right and wrong. But it's not Miss Darrow on the table. They pushed me near the gurney and I saw, for the first time, my worst fear realized. It was my husband in the bed. He had all kinds of tubes down his throat and… I screamed. 2 fairly large caliber slugs, he said. The doctors have informed me that he came out of it pretty well. Good thing he's a runner. He lost a small amount of lung capacity, but he can rebuild that by doing what he likes to do. I'd had no idea that Bernard had been hurt. It was yet another thing that I could lay the blame squarely on Adriana's shoulders for. I started crying and couldn't stop. They took me back to my room. I want that bitch in jail, I yelled. Kathy, you have to be practical, he said. Adriana Darrow hasn't committed any crimes. While we're putting our case together, we're thinking about putting her in witness protection. But she stole the flash drive, I I snarled. There are two problems wrong with that theory, he said. 1. The theft was never really reported to the police or any authority, therefore there was no crime. And then there's the fact that she gave it back. Kathy, you on the other hand will probably do time, he said. We can't charge you with anything regarding the physical cash except for counting it. But the flash drive, you were an integral part of that operation. Money laundering is a felony. We can also get you for racketeering and criminal tax evasion and… What the hell? I yelled. Kathy, we have you on tape conspiring and doing business with them, he said. You were also a party to the attempted murder on Miss Darrow. Unfortunately, that backfired. But you're gonna get the lion's share of the blame because you're the only one who survived. This is bullshit, I spat. I'm going to jail. And Adriana gets off scot-free. You'll probably send her boyfriend into witness protection with her. I don't think so, he said. I'm sorry I never had the chance to tell you who Adriana spent all of her time with, did I? I don't care who she screwed, I said tersely. I want a lawyer. He nodded his head with a very sly smile. Over the next few days, I got more and more bad news. They also did more tests. The charges against me were growing daily. They wouldn't tell me anything about Bernard. They did more tests. My insurance was beginning to balk at paying for my medical expenses. I had to talk to Bernard. The doctors were beginning to treat me as if I was made of glass. I knew something was coming. I was sure they were going to tell me that I had lost some degree of dexterity in my hands. It didn't really matter. I was never any good at giving hand jobs anyway. Bernard would just have to get used to more BJs. And then after being there for about a week it came. The news I'd been waiting for. Bernard was awake. They'd been keeping him asleep because my poor hubby was going to be in a lot of pain. Every breath he took would be painful as they weaned him off of the narcotics. I couldn't wait to see him. Sure, I knew that there would be a lot of anger and resentment, but it was something we had to go through to get back together. I was happier than I remember being in a long time. Then the other shoe dropped. Kathy, the tests are conclusive, the doctor said. Yeah, they already told me that he's gonna lose some lung capacity, I said. But if I know my husband, and I do, he'll just whip out the notebook and look at his times for every distance he likes to run. Then he'll train harder until he beats them all. No problem. He's like that. He loves a chow. Kathy, Bernard will be fine, said the doctor. It's your tests I was talking about. Okay, I know, I snapped. I've lost dexterity in my hands, so my penmanship will suck. It's no big deal. With some therapy, your penmanship will improve, he laughed. But you'll never walk again. I looked at him as if he was crazy. I smiled and whipped the blanket off of my thick legs. Bernard had always loved my short, thick legs. He thought they were sexy. I kept them shaved and lotioned all the time. There wasn't a mark or a blemish on my legs. Doctor, you're crazy, I laughed. Maybe you got your patients mixed up. There's not even any pain in my legs. All of the pain is in my back and arms. Kathy, wiggle your toes, he said. I wiggled my toes as hard as I could and smirked at him. There, I said triumphantly. What? He asked. I wiggled my toes even harder and looked at them. I was wiggling them like crazy, but my feet never moved. Kathy, after you got knocked out, a large rock landed on your upper back. It severely damaged your spinal cord. You were lucky. Even after the trauma to your head, you had absolutely no brain damage. You might have headaches for a while. Hell, you might have headaches for the rest of your life. But your brain is intact. We believe that your motor skills in your upper body will improve with therapy, but below the waist, get out, I yelled. Over the next few days, I sulked and sank into depression. I barely slept and didn't eat. All I could think about was the mess I had made of my life. Almost every terrible thing that had happened because I cheated on Bernard. If I had simply quit when Jason first made his move on me, neither Bernard nor I would be in this hospital. Even if Jason had still started up with Steiner, Bernard and I would have read about it in the news, remembered that I had once worked for him and gone about our business. So indirectly, I was responsible for Bernard getting shot. If I hadn't cheated, Adriana would never have had a reason to hate me or to try to use Bernard to hurt me. This was all my fault. One morning I woke up and found Agent Smith sitting beside my bed. Okay, we gave you a few days for your pity party, he began. Then he laid out what they wanted from me. I was supposed to testify against Steiner. Using my testimony, they would seize all of Steiner's remaining assets and launch investigations against everyone connected to him in any way. In exchange for that, I would receive a much lighter sentence and have all of my medical bills and future treatments taken care of. I would also receive financial support until I could make it on my own. If you ever want to see the outside of a jail cell, you should take it, he said. Take a few days to think it over. As he left the room, he left the door open. Aren't you worried about me leaving? I asked. Mrs. Corey, we're the government, he said. We always get our man or woman eventually. But I'm really not that worried about you running away. That was really funny, I said. Now let's check the story from Adriana's side. As I leaned down to kiss Bernard, it felt as if my heart was splitting in two. I'd spent every waking moment in his room waiting for him to regain consciousness. I understood the need for him to remain asleep to avoid unnecessary pain, but I wanted so badly to talk to him and tell him how sorry I was. I wanted to kill myself because Bernard had gotten shot trying to protect me. That was the main reason I'd left him stranded in that motel. "Miss Darrow, he's going to be fine," said a voice from behind me. "As soon as this case is done, and we've made sure you'll be safe from reprisals, he can join you in witness protection, or you can join him, I promise. Why can't we just stay together?" I hissed. "Adriana, no one knows anything about Bernard," he said. "Even our surveillance showed that they all thought you just used him and threw him away. That means that no one is looking for him. Bernard is safe. However, we still have no idea who demolished the building. There were several, rivals or peers if you would have Mr. Steiner's who may have done it, and they may be looking for you." He looked at me and paused. I knew what he was about to say. "Adriana, the person putting Bernard in danger is you," he said. "If you love the man as much as you claim, if you really want to protect him, you have to leave him again." I nodded. I couldn't form words as the tears began to fall. The government was, as they thought, extremely generous. That's spelled CHEAP. They gave Bernard and me each a finder's fee for the $85 million. Was it 10%? Nope. 5%? Nope. They gave us each 2.5%. We each got $2,125,000. They even kept the $125,000 for taxes. I'm sure that with the actual amount of money that Bernard and I had already claimed, we weren't too put out by it. The funny thing was that when it was reported in the papers, somehow the amount they claimed to have confiscated was only $65 million. Go figure. Somehow roughly $15 million vanished. Not that I think that they wouldn't steal. They're the government, right? I realized that the gas hole, that's Adriana slang for government a-hole, might be right. And there was no way I could ever risk Bernard's safety. So I wrote him a very long letter that told him exactly how much I loved him. I told him that as soon as I could get free of the government that we would meet and spend the rest of our lives together. I also told him exactly how to stay in contact with me. I did that in code just in case the gas holes tried to keep us apart. Then I kissed him goodbye one last time and left. Now let's take a look at Ben's side of the story. I awoke to pain. My throat was raw. It felt as if I had been gargling with sandpaper. I took a breath and the pain went off the charts. I tried to groan at the pain and that made it worse. The pain seemed to be coming in waves, so I made myself as still as possible and noticed that the pain came every time I breathed. There were bandages across my right side. I remembered then. I remembered the men with the guns and swerving to knock them out before they could hit. "Adriana." I said it out loud, even thought it hurt like hell. "Holy shit. Are you guys joined at the brain or something?" he asked. I just looked at him. He was one of those dark-suited guys that I remembered from just after Adri and I took off. "Where is she?" I asked through clenched teeth. I was trying to pretend that every breath I took didn't hurt. "Don't try to talk, Mr. Carter," he said. "My name is—" I began. "Yeah, I know. Bernard Quarry," he said. "But we've changed that for your own good." "Huh," I croaked. "You're a fringe player in a very serious investigation," he said. "You don't know much about what happened and your only involvement was first confronting your wife about her affair with Jason Darrow and then helping Darrow's daughter escape. No one is looking for you. No one really knows that you exist, but they may or may not know your wife. If they do, they know her name, and she has your last name. So you have two options. Number one is you can go into the witness protection program with your wife, or you can let Bernard Quarry die in the building collapse. We've already established your new identity. You even have your exact same engineering degree from the exact same university. Mr. Carter, what about Adriana?" I asked. "Miss Darrow is going into the witness protection program," he said. "We need her help verifying some of the information we've accrued. We guarantee her safety. I'm sure that information about your whereabouts can be provided to her if she's interested." "Can I speak to her?" I asked. "I'm afraid that won't be possible," he said. "She's already gone. She did leave you a letter, though." I read the letter and smiled. As usual, Adriana was a step ahead of them. The lines about her love for me meant much to me, but they weren't important. I'm pretty sure she knew that they would read the letter before I did and decide whether or not to give it to me. Anything that they thought might hurt their interests would have been redacted, or simply had the letter destroyed. There was one line that only she and I would understand. She told me to buy another car. She told me to buy a car that would make me braver. A car that I wouldn't be afraid to drive to places that I never drove the other one. To most people it meant nothing, but it was an inside joke for Adriana and I. It told me where to go to keep in touch with her until we could meet again, and failing that, where to watch for when she got loose from her witness protection people. The only place I'd ever been afraid to drive my car was that dirt road to her uncle's place. The feds knew nothing about her uncle, so whether they let her go when they were done with her or she had to escape and we went on the open road again, she'd get word to her uncle. "So where'd you guys come up with a name like Ben Carter from?" I asked. "We wanted your new name to start with the same, but to make it different." The next day, $2 million richer, I was transferred to a regular hospital and my life began again. Before I was released, I did see an article in the local papers about the tragedy at the new Darrow building. The entire building had supposedly been destroyed in a freak gas explosion. The building had been scheduled to open in a few months and at that point hadn't been safety inspected. The contractor was being held liable for the shoddy workmanship. Killed in the collapse were local businessman Alaric Steiner, a personal friend of the mayor, and Jason Darrow, the owner of the building. It is presumed that the two were discussing the possibility of Steiner's company renting space in the new building. Also killed were Mr. Darrow's secretary, Kathy Corey, her husband Bernard, and Mr. Darrow's daughter Adriana. Funeral services have yet to be announced. After being released from the hospital, I waited a couple of weeks before trying to contact Adriana's uncle. I was fortunate. The feds knew nothing about him. We compared notes and discussed what had gone wrong with the plan. "Hell, as far as I'm concerned, it all went right," he said. "I told that girl that it was pretty much a suicide job. It got worse when the snipers covering Adriana couldn't see her under that awning. I'm sorry as hell that you got shot, Bernard, but you seem to have pulled through. I don't think Adriana would have. That girl ain't got much meat on her bones." He showed me Adriana's Snapchat account. It was under another name. It was the way they'd kept in contact during the planning of Adriana's revenge. She'd been asking about me for weeks. Except for missing me, she was fine and she had some news for me. The FBI would probably be done with her in a few months, and then she'd have the choice of staying in witness protection or going on her own with a new identity like I did. The few months started out as 3, then grew to 4, and finally 5. I bought a house and built my car while I waited. Finally, the word came that I was to meet her on the open road in the desert in Arizona. My mind became alert again, and my daydreams faded as I saw a set of halo headlights in the distance. As the lights get closer, I recognize them as being a Camaro's lights. But I've passed at least a dozen Camaros that day. As the car drew closer, I noticed that the top was down and I saw her. My heart started beating like a drum. Luckily, I've had months for my lung and ribs to heal. We both swerved and stopped. I got out of my car and ran to her. I slowed down as I got to her car. She didn't get out. My heart started beating even faster and my face fell. I knew something was wrong. "What's wrong?" I asked. She said exactly the words that I didn't want to hear. "Bernard, honey, I'm sorry, but there's something you need to know," she said. I decided to take the classy way out. "Don't worry about it, Adriana," I said. "I totally understand. I guess it was just the excitement and the adventure. You know, the living life on the edge with our lives in danger that made it into something that wouldn't have happened otherwise." She twisted her head to the side and listened to me while looking at me strangely. "I just want to let you know that I understand how tough this is on you, so I won't make this any harder than it has to be. Thanks for everything, and Bernard, lean over," she said. "One last kiss?" I said. She smiled sweetly. I leaned over door and moved my face near hers. She slapped me so fast and so hard that I almost blacked out. "Who is she?" she screamed. "Who is who?" I yelled. "She who? The bitch you think you're moving me out of the way for," she screamed. "Some washed-up woman with huge assets and a Pontiac Firebird, right? I can't leave you alone for a second." I burst out laughing. "Adriana, you're the only person I could ever love," I said. "I doubt it. In fact, I think you're a liar, Bernard." "Adriana," I began. "That's not my name anymore," she smirked. "It's Adri." "Wait," I laughed. "They changed your name from Adriana to Adri?" "Yep. I insisted on it," she said. "That's what you always called me anyway. It makes me excited when you call me Adri." "Adri, do you still—" I began. "Love you?" she asked. "Of course, you moron. It's just that." "It's just what?" I asked. "Bernard, do you remember 5 months ago when we got together?" she asked. "Of course I do. It was awesome. Just you and me in our cars on the road. It was the best time of my entire life." "Mine too," she said. "But things are different now." "Why?" She opened her door and got out. Adriana was still as beautiful as ever. In fact, she was probably more beautiful. I remembered one of the things that Kathy had said about Adri. I heard it on the tapes from the bugs on the office. Kathy said that Adriana glowed. As beautiful as she seemed a little off. She was a little bit chunky. I didn't care. I love you, Adri, I said. I don't care if you got a little chunky. I'm not fat, you idiot, she smirked. I'm pregnant. Apparently during our honeymoon on the road. One of us forgot the protections. Don't you mean both of us did? I smiled. So I don't want to force you into anything, but we have to get married, she said. This is gonna suck. If you don't want, I began. Don't make me slap you again, buddy, she said. I would have married you the first time you called me Adri. And thank you very much for proving my point. What point? I asked. You just said that I was the only person you could love, didn't you? I nodded. Look at your hands, Bernard, she smirked. You can't wait to touch my belly. I think you love her as much as you love me already. How do you know it's a her? I asked. I know, she said. Even as she said it, she reached up and wrapped her arms around me. It was the best feeling ever. Okay, honey, I told you this was gonna suck. She said, so let's get it over with. She said, follow me. I shrugged my shoulders and got back in my car. We were heading back in the direction she'd come from. We drove about 40 miles and came to a place that from a distance looked like a prison. But as we got closer, shit, it looked even more like a prison. A massive barbed wire fence surrounded a wall that the minister in charge would proudly take credit for. Adriana pulled up in front of a gate and got out of her car to talk to the guard stationed there. She pointed at me, and the guard looked my way. He called someone on a phone and nodded several times as if the person he was talking to could see him. Then Adriana had me the thumbs up sign and got back in her car. I followed her inside of the gate. We parked in front of a large building and went inside. We went through a metal detector and passed several obvious checkpoints. We were waved through at every point. Finally, we got to a section that looked more like a hospital or nursing home than a prison. Adriana wrapped her arms around me as we stood in front of a door. She went inside, leaving the door cracked open. It was strange. She stood there halfway inside of the room and halfway out of it. She held my hand as she spoke to the person inside of the room. We're even, you crusty old bitch, she said. Our deal was that if I brought you your heart's desire, you'd owe me a favor. The voice I heard on the other side sounded as if it had been ripped from the throat of a dead frog. It was a hoarse croaking sound. What are you babbling about? The voice asked. You know, my dream was to have had one more talk with, so I could explain, but he's dead. I read it in the papers. He didn't die in the collapse like they said, but he was shot twice, trying to save your worthless butt. Adriana pulled me into the room and I saw Kathy, or what was left of her. She was dressed all in white. She sat in a wheelchair staring at me in surprise. Bernard, she croaked. They told me you were dead. I was told that you were too, I said. Her legs and lower body had become smaller. Perhaps it was a result of diet, but more than likely being in the wheelchair meant some sort of lower body injury that prevented her from using her legs. They were just wasting away. Her tummy had also grown. Kathy was never in Adriana's league when it came to facial beauty. She was more the cute, girl next door type, but I had loved her so hard and for so long. There was a huge, jagged scare across her face and a wound on the side of her head. They had combed her hair over it, but it was a comb-over of different proportions. It would have been better to just leave it. But my problem with Kathy wasn't her looks. It was the betrayal. That betrayal had taken all of the love I'd built with her and turned it to anger. You're angry with me, she croaked. Bernard, you have to understand. None of this was ever supposed to happen. I never wanted it. All I ever wanted was you. Bernard, goddammit, you're not a woman. You just don't get it. Look at that hooker who brought you here. She's young and she's pretty, but someday she'll be on the verge of old age too, and she'll feel just like I did. All I wanted was an adventure, honey. I didn't look for sex. The sex was awful. The first time Jason touched me, it didn't feel sexy or good. I wasn't aroused by it. I didn't want it. What I felt was revulsion and if you had walked out of there, none of this would have happened, I said. I would have ripped Jason's head off and shit down the hole. It wasn't like that, she croaked. I felt pity for him. Jason was always a nice guy. He was just over his head. He was an old-fashioned businessman in a world that eats old-fashioned men alive. He just couldn't keep up with all of the changes and the new business models. At the same time, Bernard, he was watching the woman he loved decay. If you'd seen him, you'd have felt sorry for him too. He had his good days and his bad days. His good days were days when he'd come to work and tell us all how she'd remembered his name or spoke a complete sentence. Sometimes she remembered that they had a daughter. There were also times when she was perfectly lucid and normal for days or even weeks at a time, but she was usually so physically weak during those times that she could barely raise her head, let alone go out. It was strange. When her mind failed, she seemed to have the energy of a child, but when she had her faculties about her, she was as weak as a sick kitten. It's no wonder Jason couldn't keep the business afloat. He was beset on all sides. I felt like it was my duty to help him however I could. Bernard, he needed me. And honey, you didn't. Tears rolled down her cheeks, and even some of Adriana's hatred for her dimmed. Bernard, you sparkle like a diamond. You have the energy and drive of someone much younger than we are. You go out in the park and run farther and faster than makes sense. You're great at your job. You have your car and all of your little projects. Honey, you've gotten better with time. At the same time I was fading. I was just getting older and feeling less attractive. But when I was at work, oh boy, I was Jason's right hand. At home, I felt like nothing. I was just another chunky suburban housewife. I got older every day. No one even noticed me unless I left my shirt open. But in the office, I ruled. I was indispensable, I was smart, I was necessary, and I was hot. Even my curves got noticed more. I've asked myself a million times why I didn't slap Jason and walk away, but that power, Bernard, it was like a narcotic. I couldn't just give it up and return to obscurity. Bernard, I love you. With every breath I take. I never stopped loving you. Being a part of the business, even after Steiner ruined it, was just something I needed. Can you ever even try to understand it? Kathy, you were my entire life, I hissed. I had to get a hold of myself. Look, I'm sorry about everything that happened to you, I said. And while I'm not sure I can get past the anger I feel, I can almost understand what you thought was going on. What do you mean what I thought was going on? She croaked angrily. I know what I was feeling. How dare you belittle my feelings? Screw your feelings, I yelled. How dare you belittle our life? She seemed to be shocked that I'd yelled at her. You know what you were feeling? It was bullshit. It's not me who didn't understand or didn't know what you were going through. It was you. What you were feeling was vanity, plain and simple. Did you ever hear me say that you weren't attractive? Nope. It never happened. Shit, Kathy, every time you breathed I was trying to screw you. It wasn't me you weren't pretty enough for. It was yourself. Her mouth dropped open like she was about to say something and couldn't come up with the words. Kathy, I worked my butt off running and trying to stay in shape for 2 reasons. Number 1, I like to run. And number 2, for you. Every time we went anywhere all I heard from you was, look at that guy. We used to go to school with him. Look at his gut. What a lard he turned out to be. I didn't want you thinking of me that way. Personally, I didn't care what I look like. I'm not on TV. I don't think the average guy gives a flying crap what he looks like. But I wanted you to be happy with me because I loved you. Everything was always about what it looked like with you, Kathy. Any place we went, like that last lunch we had together, we couldn't just have lunch out on our own deck. Nope, we had to go to some trendy sidewalk bistro where a bunch of people we don't know could see us. And that's why you couldn't slap Jason and walk away, Kathy. Having people see you and want you fed your ego, and no matter how much you loved me or claimed to, I just wasn't enough. She started sobbing and looked at me as if she expected me to run to her and wrap my arms around her. She even held her arms out to me as if to give me a hint, but I stood there firmly planted. You're right, honey, she cried. Everything you said was true. I know I hurt you. Can you ever forgive me? Sure, I said. You're forgiven. Oh, Bernard, she gushed. You must really love me to forgive me that easily. I promise to do much better this time around. I started laughing then. Are you out of your mind? I asked. I forgave you because it doesn't hurt anymore. But that's only because I no longer give a flying crap about you. I never said anything about another chance. That was when Adriana stepped in. Okay, Kathy, I gave you what you wanted most, she said quietly. I gave you a chance to explain things to Bernard. Now you have to keep your promise. Kathy was still looking at me and trying to figure out what to say after my outburst. What do you want, Adriana? She asked angrily. She was treating Adriana like a minor annoyance. In her mind, she could deal with Adriana as a way of buying herself time to figure out how to handle me. I just need you to sign these papers, Adriana said. She gave Kathy a stack of papers and a pen. Kathy barely looked at the papers. She was too busy looking at me. But at the last minute, her eyes zoomed in on the top of the paper. What the hell? She screamed. These are divorce papers. There is no way I'm signing this. Ever. You promised. Hissed Adriana. You wouldn't be the first person I broke a promise to, laughed Kathy. Wait a minute. That's how you got him here. You two are still together. You think you can just brush me off like shit on the bottom of your shoe? Well, it ain't gonna happen, bitch. Bernard and I will be married until the day I die. This might be that day, grumbled Adriana. Screw you, Kathy, I said. Come on, honey, I told Adriana. I don't want you begging her for anything. I took Adriana's hand and headed for the door. Bernard, wait, screamed Kathy. You can't do this. You love me, Bernard. This is worse than what I did. I never set out to hurt you, Bernard, but you're ripping my heart out. Walk it off. I threw over my shoulder without looking back. Outside of the building, I held Adriana's hand and tried to wipe away her tears. That went well, I said. It only made her cry more. I love you, Bernard, she cried. I just wanted us to get married and have our baby and be a family. Adri, we are a family, I said. I love you too. Forever and ever. But she sniffed. Oh, all right, I said. Get into your funny insect-like car and let's go get married. She perked up. We can't get married until that old witch divorces you or dies, she said. Yes, we can. How? She asked. Kathy is legally married to Bernard Corey, I said. But the FBI gave me a new name, remember? Just like they did you. Remember? And Ben Carter ain't married. He will be soon, she gushed. She jumped onto me and wrapped her arms around me. Hey, you're squeezing my baby, I said. She doesn't care, she said. And she needs to get used to it. That is it. Now let's check the story from Kathy's side. The argument with Bernard had left me angry. For the past 6 months, I'd been unable to track him down. I hadn't been able to reach Adriana either. I'd left the FBI facility several months ago when it became apparent that there were no lingering members of Steiner's organization left to even try to find me. It really wasn't like in the movies. There was no national organized crime cabal. Steiner's narcotic business had been snatched up by other drug dealers. His hookers were probably still out there, only they worked for someone else or perhaps for themselves. Steiner's passing had been just a momentary ripple in a cesspool of vice. The waters had returned to their murky state, and no one mourned his passing. My disability made it necessary for me to have around-the-clock care. I have no doubt that the $2 million the FBI gave me will probably only last 10 years at most. After that, I'll end up in a nursing home. And it won't be a place as nice as the ones Jason's wife was in. There are many thoughts that go through my mind daily. I do have some degree of memory loss from the building's collapse. That was one of the reasons that Agent Smith wanted Adriana there. She could verify everything I told them while they were building their case against Steiner. It's a good thing that he had no kids or a wife, because the government took all of his assets. I sometimes remember a few things that I never told the feds, like the fact that I'm sure there was more than $85 million on that flash drive. But for the life of me, I can't remember how much there was or what happened to it. But Steiner's money isn't something I spend a lot of time thinking about. Mostly I wonder where my husband is. My thoughts were interrupted by my nurse bringing in the mail. She opened each envelope and set them down on the table in front of me. I still haven't fully regained the dexterity in my fingers, but I get better every day. In the middle of the pile, I found an envelope with several pictures in it. The first picture was a picture of an absolutely beautiful baby. As I looked carefully at her face, her features seemed really familiar. I looked at the back of the picture. Someone wrote the child's name on it. Her name is Betsy Carter. I guess Betsy is her nickname. Her full name is Elizabeth Ann Carter. A shiver went down my spine at the collection of names. Jason Darrow, God bless his soul. His wife's name was Elizabeth, and Bernard's mother's name was Anne. The shiver going down my spine turned into a genuine chill. I looked at the picture again. That child has Bernard's eyes, I swear it. And she has that same heart-shaped face and pouty mouth Adriana has. I dropped that photo and picked up the next. That photo almost caused my heart to stop. It showed Bernard, my husband, in a tux, at a wedding. Next to him, beaming, a heavily pregnant Adriana smiled at him, oblivious to the camera. She focused everything on her husband, the way I should have. The back of the photo proclaimed the marriage of Ben and Adri Carter. I screamed and burst into tears, sweeping everything on my table onto the floor. As the photos, mail, cups, and everything else on my desk fell, one photo settled onto my lap. This was a more recent photo. Adriana was in a swimsuit holding onto Bernard. Bernard had the baby in his arms. They were both standing in front of their cars near some hockey museum. I flipped the photo over to read the back. Hi, Kathy. Ben and I are doing what we love most, seeing the U.S. one town at a time. This is our honeymoon. On the open road. We're having a great time. Wish you were here. So I could beat your crippled butt. And she signed it Adri. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.